Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Orsolya Gal. Orsolya Gal had lived in Forest Hills for over 10 years. She is originally from Hungary and met her future husband, Howard, at a Christmas party in Budapest in 1994. At that time, she was 20 years old and had just graduated from business school, while Howard was about to complete his master's degree. They exchanged love letters for several weeks, then taking a vacation together in Thailand. After returning to New York to continue his studies, he invited she to visit him, and they have been together ever since. He founded a consulting firm and was very successful. Meanwhile, she worked in Manhattan for many years, eventually putting her career on hold to have and raise her two sons, Jamie and Leo. On August 2, 2012, the family moved into a 5-bedroom home. They lived happily together, and friends described Orsolya as outgoing and friendly. People say she is always smiling, loves to joke, and is willing to chat about any topic. She loved to travel, and her Facebook profile showcased photos from family trips to Paris, China, and Tokyo. However, her greatest happiness is her sons, whom she cared for deeply and was very attentive. On the morning of April 16, 2022, Glenn Van Nostrade was walking his dog around 8:00 a.m. At this time, he saw a large cloth bag lying among a pile of trash near the sidewalk, on the grass near the corner of Venu Subway and Jackie Robinson Avenue. While he often encountered litter on that busy road, something about this bag felt off. As he approached, his dog became agitated and tense. Only when he stood near the bag he noticed the reason. Blood was seeping out and running down the concrete sidewalk. Initially, Glenn suspected the bag contained an animal carcass. He nudged it with his foot and found it surprisingly heavy. Curious, he bent down to unzip the bag. Then he saw a pair of pale bare legs inside. He tried to make sense of what he was seeing. At first, he thought they were the legs of a mannequin because the skin looked stiff and unnatural. However, when he unzipped the bag further, he realized that the legs were covered by black jeans, a belt, and part of a woman's waist. Glenn found the woman curled up in a fetal position, her head bowed. He called 911 at 8:02 a.m., deeply disturbed by his discovery. He believed the victim might have been a teenage girl, based on her physique. Immediately after that, the police arrived. They quickly blocked the area around the crime scene. At this time, Glenn decided to use his dog to search the nearby area. While crossing the subway avenue, he noticed a trail of blood and alerted the police. This bloody trail, which extended for half a mile from the location of the bag, ultimately led the investigators to a $2 million house on Juno Street. A team of police stormed that house. During a quick search, they discovered blood on the first floor and in the basement, as well as a bloody knife on the third floor. In a bedroom, they found Leo Klein lying in bed. He said he lived in the house with his parents, Orsolya and Howard. He also said that his brother Jamie was away. After questioning, the police determined that Leo knew nothing about the situation, so they released him into the care of a relative. Meanwhile, the police identified the body found in a bag. It was Orsolya, Leo's mother, who was 51 years old. A forensic examination revealed that she had her throat cut and suffered 58 stab wounds to her torso, neck, and arms. There were also injuries on her palms and fingers, indicating a struggle. Forensic expert Miles said that the crime was very brutal, and the fact that the body was carelessly disposed of showed that this was an act driven by emotion. The extreme violence of the attack indicated that the murderer was likely someone known to Orsolya, rather than a stranger. This led investigators to suspect that the perpetrator could be the husband, a child, or even a lover. The youngest son, Leo, has been eliminated as a suspect. Jamie, the eldest son, and Howard, the husband, were both out of town on the day of Orsolya's death, but they were still being questioned. The identity of the mystery man who dumped the bag remains unknown. The investigation has caused anxiety in Forest Hills following Orsolya's sad death. Neighbors were deeply moved by the tragedy. Those familiar with Orsolya and her family brought flowers and offered their condolences. The shocking death has raised more questions than answers, leaving the motive for the crime a mystery, as police continue to hunt for the suspect. When the police informed the media that Howard and Jamie were important people, the public's attention quickly turned to Jamie. On the morning of Friday, April 15, Orsolya was reportedly looking at potential colleges for Jamie. Howard tweeted that he arrived in Portland at 1:36 a.m. on April 16. He later posted another status, which has since been deleted, announcing that he would be returning home to New York soon. The change appears to have come after Howard received a heartbreaking text message from Orsolya earlier that morning. The message said, "He's back. Don't call the police, or he'll kill the Howard family." Shortly thereafter, Howard was contacted by police and informed that the body of his wife, Orsolya, had been found. He worried about his family's safety and faced scrutiny from reporters and social analysts. They said that his Twitter posts seemed like a way to create an alibi. The message from Orsolya's phone seems like a fictional threat from a movie, making one wonder why a killer would waste time sending such a message after committing the crime. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry into the house. It appears that Orsolya knew the killer, or that he used a spare key to enter the house. Police are examining phone calls, surveillance camera videos, and receipts from places Orsolya visited to reconstruct her journey before her death. On Friday, April 16, 2022, she planned to go to Manhattan that evening to see an opera at Lincoln Center with friends. However, when checking her phone, the truth was completely different. On the night of her murder, she had been in contact with 3 different men. One of them will accompany her to Lincoln Center. All 3 men are currently under investigation. That night, Orsolya returned home alone by train and stopped by a bar at Forest Hills train station. This is where she often comes to have a drink or a snack after going out. She spoke with the manager, whom she knew well. Police believe Orsolya entered her home at 2:40 a.m., around the same time her attacker gained entry. At 4:30 a.m., he carried her body out using her son's hockey bag. A note found on the refrigerator read, "Find a new handyman." On the night of the murder, Orsolya had spoken with 3 men, one of whom was David Bonola, a 40-years-old handyman who had been working in their home for the past 2 years. He specialized in heating and ventilation. He is married with 2 children. However, 21 years ago, he illegally immigrated to the United States from Mexico. By the time of Orsolya's death, he had become estranged from his family and was living in an apartment in nearby Richmond Hill. Neighbors described he as a night owl who often played guitar or rode his bike after dark, frequently stopping at a local cafe for food. The police discovered that David had a close relationship with Orsolya, as they often communicated over the phone. He frequently left comments and heart emojis on her Facebook photos, often calling her the most beautiful woman. According to the owner of a store across the street from his apartment, he would come in every evening to buy a red rose and even showed the owner a photo of Orsolya, expressing his love for her. The police were aware that she had been in contact with he in early April 2022, just weeks before her murder. The authorities then decided to secretly follow him to look for new clues. 21-year-old Olivia Kolinsky had been a barista at a cafe for 3 years, where David was a frequent visitor. Olivia described him as strange and somewhat creepy, noting that he often stalked people. He frequented the cafe multiple times a week, watching the waitresses and baristas closely, making comments about their looks. He also left affectionate notes in the tip jar. He even proposed to 2 of the employees. The cafe staff called the police several times, but he always managed to leave before they arrived. David's passion for YouTube clearly shows his thoughts and desires, mainly revolving around 2 themes, seduction and violence. He has created a YouTube playlist with many videos related to local crime. The playlist also includes many videos about intimacy and women, offering tips on attraction and seduction. One playlist has over 200 videos, all aimed at helping viewers develop their ability to attract women. It is worth noting that he is a man with a rich imagination and a penchant for violence. Then, surveillance cameras captured images of David walking near his apartment with a homemade white bandage on his left arm. That day, he visited a city doctor for treatment of cuts on his hands. However, he was referred to the hospital because the cuts were too deep. The police postponed cleaning up the trash at the crime scene for several days to conduct a special search, because they believe this pile of trash may contain evidence that help convict him. Among the discarded objects in the trash pile, they found blood-soaked brown boots, believed to belong to David, which were worn when he stabbed Orsolya nearly 60 times, along with a bloody t-shirt and bloody bandages. On Wednesday, April 19, 2024, detectives returned to the area to locate David, who had noticed he was being followed. David approached a patrol car and said he heard they were looking for him. The police then took him to the station, and there he admitted his involvement in Orsolya's murder. After a brief pause to eat a croissant, he repeated his confession for the video recording. During the prosecution, David explained that he and Orsolya had an on-again, off-again relationship for 2 years. Recently, she had ended their relationship again. On the morning of April 16, he went to her house to try to reconcile. However, their argument became so violent and loud that they had to go down to the basement to avoid waking her son, Leo. The argument became more heated, making David very angry. In a fit of anger, he grabbed a knife and cut her throat, stabbing her multiple times. To prevent Leo from discovering the body, he placed it in the boy's hockey bag and discarded it in a nearby forest park. David admitted that he sent a threatening message to her husband, Howard, in which he stated he would kill the rest of the family. However, his testimony contained several inconsistencies, particularly regarding his possession of a knife from Orsolya's kitchen during the fight in the basement. The next day, he changed his confession. He explained that he had gone to her house after learning that she had given him HIV and a sexually transmitted disease she had contracted from other men. He claimed that he knew she had received a call from another man and was planning to meet that man, which he could not accept. He also reported that during the altercation, she took a knife and forced him to leave the house, threatening to kill him. At that moment, he seized the knife from her and harmed her. On April 20, David Bonola was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, first-degree criminal trespass, and fourth-degree criminal possession of a weapon. Despite confessing to the crime twice, he pleaded not guilty. If found guilty, he could face a sentence ranging from 25 years to life in prison. District Attorney Melinda Catt announced that a serious crime had occurred, leaving 2 teenagers, Leo and Jamie, without their mother. This incident has also created fear in the community. David Bonola was sentenced to 25 years in prison in November 2022 after pleading guilty to manslaughter in the killing of Orsolya Gal in Queens, New York. After his prison term, he will be required to serve 5 years of probation. Many believe Orsolya shares some responsibility for her tragic death, stemming from her infidelity. At the memorial service, Jamie, the eldest son of she, spoke for himself and his younger brother, Leo. He expressed that when he thinks of his mother, he remembers the hard work and dedication she put into them. He said she wanted her children to be happy, and her happiness was their happiness. He stressed that they would always remember this. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marie Carlson. In 1974, a baby girl named Marie was born in the Philippines to an ordinary family. Concerned about her daughter's future, Marie's mother made the difficult decision to send her to the United States, where she believed Marie would have better opportunities for success. As a result, Marie was placed in a foster family with a military background, where she met a young girl named Esther, who was the same age as her. Two young girls quickly became close friends, unaware of a surprising fact that linked them together. What Marie didn't know was that her American foster father was actually her biological parent, making Esther her biological sister. As they grew older, the sisters left their parents' house and decided to start a new life together. They chose to settle in Florida, where they rented a cozy apartment near a karaoke club that soon became their favorite hangout spot. Marie Carlson's life was a vibrant reflection of her favorite color, pink. She had always believed that living a beautiful life was essential, surrounding herself with flowers and lovely things. But everything changed when she met Jeff, and she discovered a new, profound meaning in life: love. They quickly fell for each other, got married, and had a daughter named Paris, a name that symbolized the love and beauty they shared. Despite their happy family life, Jeff remained an enigma. His past and last name were shrouded in mystery. Meanwhile, Marie was driven to succeed in her career. She had set her sights on joining the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and was studying criminal law to achieve her goal. However, her journey was not without its challenges. As she progressed in her career, the obstacles grew tougher, and despite her best efforts, Marie ultimately left the police service without realizing her dream. Marie's life took a devastating turn due to a mental health disorder that worsened over time. The trauma of being sexually abused as a child left her with deep emotional scars. As a result, her daily life became increasingly painful, and her relationship with her husband, Jeff, began to suffer. The love they once shared started to fade, and their marriage eventually ended in divorce. The divorce was a difficult but necessary decision, as both Marie and Jeff knew they needed to prioritize their daughter, Paris. They agreed that it would be best for Paris to live with Jeff, allowing her to escape the negativity that had been affecting their home. Despite the challenges, they completed the necessary paperwork amicably and with minimal drama. Throughout the long and difficult divorce process, Marie and Jeff remained dedicated to making decisions that would benefit and care for their daughter, Paris. They remained on good terms and continued to care for each other as friends. Marie was grateful for Jeff's support and made it a priority to spend quality time with Paris, never missing a birthday. Marie had faced many challenges, but she remained determined and refused to surrender. Despite her struggles, she never lost hope. One day, she discovered what had been missing in her life: faith. This newfound faith led her to the Emerald Coast Church, founded by the charismatic Pastor James Flanders and his wife Tanya. From the moment she stepped into the church, Marie felt a sense of belonging. The warm and welcoming atmosphere, combined with Pastor James Flanders' sincere and heartfelt sermons, made her feel at home. Marie began the process of recovering and healing from her past experiences, working to make amends and move forward. The Flanders, known for their kindness and generosity, had created a sanctuary where people could find help and support. For Marie, the church became more than just a place of worship. It was a loving community that accepted her with open arms. As she surrounded herself with the church's loving atmosphere, Marie began to heal and grow. With each passing day, Marie felt a sense of freedom and joy that she had never known before. She was no longer the lost and broken person she once was. Instead, she was a strong and vibrant individual, filled with hope and happiness. As she looked out at the sunny Florida landscape, Marie's eyes shone with a newfound radiance, reflecting the beauty and joy that had blossomed in her soul. The church was more than just a building; it was a community of people who genuinely cared for one another. For Marie, this small community became a second family, filled with love, light, and faith. From the outside, the church appeared ordinary, but inside, it felt like a warm and welcoming home. The people gathered there were united by their shared faith, and time seemed to stand still as they came together. Marie, however, was hiding a secret. She was pregnant, and the weight of this secret was crushing her. She felt ashamed and fearful, and only a few close people knew the truth. In June 2021, at the age of 37, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Grace. As the news spread through the quiet town, people began to wonder who the father of the child was. The truth was painful. The father was a man Marie had been dating briefly, but he had turned out to be abusive and hurtful. When Marie became pregnant, he disappeared without a word. Left alone and broken, Marie found solace in the church. The Flanders family and the local community showed Marie and her newborn daughter overwhelming kindness and acceptance. They provided a safe and nurturing environment, filling a vital need in Marie's life by becoming like a substitute family. Through their selfless support, Marie was able to find the courage, optimism, and start the healing process from the trauma of her past. Marie had been feeling trapped in her life, and just 3 months after giving birth to her daughter, she made a shocking decision that left everyone stunned. She posted a mysterious message on social media announcing that she was leaving, not just her city, but also her family and friends behind. Marie had been secretly planning her escape, careful not to reveal her intentions to anyone, fearing they would try to talk her out of it. She only hinted at her dreams and expressed her love for her loved ones, making it clear that she was leaving for good. Her departure left many questions unanswered. Where was she going? What path would she take? And would she achieve her dreams? Marie's loved ones were devastated, worried sick about her safety and unsure of what to do next. The uncertainty surrounding her disappearance only added to their anxiety. Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, was particularly frantic and decided to contact the police to help find her. As the days passed, the worry and fear for Marie's fate only intensified. Marie's sudden disappearance from Fort Walton Beach had barely stopped making headlines when a disturbing revelation emerged. She had left behind her 3-month-old daughter. This news sparked immediate concern from Marie's sister, Esther, who knew her siblings' devotion to her children. "This is out of character for her," Esther said, her voice shaking. "She's always been extremely protective of her kids." Those who knew Marie were shocked by her disappearance. As a mother, she had always been exemplary, particularly with her 7-year-old daughter, Paris. Marie's ex-husband, Jeff, was especially stunned when he learned that she had stopped visiting Paris, as they had been inseparable. Now, at 37, Marie had vanished without a trace. While she had the right to start anew, the police couldn't ignore the fact that she had left her young child behind. The police analyzed Marie's recent messages and discovered a peculiar aspect: her writing style had changed significantly from before. This led them to suspect that she might be under duress or that the messages were fabricated. An investigation was launched, which soon impacted Marie's personal life. Questions arose about the identity of her daughter Grace's father and the nature of their relationship with Marie. However, even Marie's sister Esther was unable to confirm or deny these suspicions. The police were faced with a complex web of secrets surrounding Marie's disappearance, including the mysterious messages and the uncertainty about Grace's father. In an effort to clarify the situation, the police spoke with Tanya and James Flanders. They revealed that Marie had a history of disappearing temporarily without explanation. The Flanders also shared that Marie had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which could have contributed to her erratic behavior. A few weeks before she vanished, Marie experienced a severe episode of depression. She began taking medication but was forced to stop due to her pregnancy. Feeling extremely unwell, Marie asked the Flanders family to care for her daughter while she rested. After lunch, Marie lay down to rest, and Tanya and Grace went out shopping. James stayed with Marie to keep an eye on her, but he left for a short time to go home. When he returned, he was shocked to find that Marie and her car were nowhere to be found. The Flanders family immediately launched a search for Marie. They scoured the streets, checking the parking lots of every building, but found no sign of her. Then, James had an idea to check the airport, and to their astonishment, they found Marie's car parked there. Using the spare keys, James drove the car back home. When investigators examined the car, they did not find any suspicious marks or evidence that could lead to Marie's whereabouts. The investigators returned to the airport, hoping to find new leads. Their plan was to review the parking lot camera footage, as the airport is required to keep this information on file. They also hoped to find Marie's ticket, which might have her fingerprints on it. However, when they found the ticket, it didn't yield any useful results. The ticket was clean, with no fingerprints or other clues that could aid in the investigation. A search of Marie's car also turned up nothing, and the parking ticket didn't contain any fingerprints. To make matters worse, the cameras in the parking lot weren't working on the day Marie disappeared. This lack of footage was a significant setback for the investigation, leaving the question of whether Marie's disappearance was a tragic accident or a carefully planned escape. As the investigation continued, the police began to suspect that Marie's disappearance might be more sinister than initially thought. They reclassified the case as a murder investigation and shifted their focus to the mysterious father of Marie's child, Grace. The police returned to the church, hoping to find some answers to their questions. Who was Grace's father, and what role did he play in Marie's disappearance? The church, where Marie had found solace, was filled with rumors and speculation. Parishioners whispered about Marie's secret and the plan that had been weighing on her mind. Marie had been struggling with depression and had considered an abortion, but the Flanders family, who were eager to expand their family, had strongly opposed this idea. The Flanders asked Marie to leave her baby with them, while hypocritically offering to help her. Unbeknownst to others, they desperately wanted a second child, despite both being over 40. One parishioner claimed that Marie's baby, Grace, was a reward from above for the Flanders' good deeds. The situation took a turn when Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, arrived on the scene. He was not the father of the child but had information that could solve the mystery. Jeff revealed that he had noticed Marie's pregnancy and had questioned her about the father. Marie lied, saying she was a surrogate mother for the Flanders. However, the investigation that followed revealed the truth. Police spoke with Tanya's friends, who were also church members, and eventually, the truth came to light. It turned out that the father of the child was James, and the conception was natural. This meant that James's wife, Tanya, had to silently accept the situation. The revelation caught the investigators' attention, and the Flanders were summoned for questioning once again. Tanya was the only one who showed up for questioning. She confirmed the information and added that she was present when the child was conceived. According to her, everything happened with the mutual consent of all parties involved. After Marie disappeared, disturbing details about her relationship with James and Tanya came to light. It turned out that James was intimately involved with both women, which was not just infidelity but a form of polygamy. At one point, they even celebrated the child's birthday together, taking a photo of James, Tanya, and Marie posing as a happy family. However, this photo was meant to mislead, suggesting that the celebration was only for Tanya and that Marie was not involved. But after questioning Tanya's friends, the investigation uncovered new information that revealed the true nature of their relationship. Although Tanya claimed that Marie was initially happy with the arrangement, it became clear that this was no longer the case at some point. Marie's feelings for her daughter Grace were stirred after she was born, and she became hesitant to give her up to Tanya. According to friends, Marie's reservations fueled her jealousy of Tanya, sparking suspicion that Marie might not want to surrender her child to her rival and planned to steal James away from her. These rumors swiftly elevated Tanya to the top of the suspect list. Following Marie's disappearance, all Tanya's problems would essentially dissolve, granting her the opportunity to raise Grace solo and retain her status as James's beloved wife. However, 2 months had passed since Marie vanished, yet no leads emerged. Investigators diligently attempted to unravel the mysteries surrounding Marie's disappearance using available tools, including GPS data. Despite its limitations in 2011, investigators focused on analyzing phone records and message logs to gather more information. The records revealed that Marie had accompanied James to the airport, but Tanya was absent. This development coincided with the unexpected visit of Jason, a young priest who often represented James and ultimately chose to share information with investigators. Jason shared with others a conversation he had unintentionally overheard after Marie vanished. James expressed his distress and concern, stating that he would have to leave the country due to Marie's disappearance, but he couldn't disclose the details. He only mentioned that something terrible had occurred during Marie's severe depression. Prior to her disappearance, James had stayed with Marie at a clinic for a few days, while Jason temporarily took his place. Meanwhile, rumors about polygamy began circulating among the church parishioners, which shocked Jason when he discovered them. Upon James' return from the hospital, Jason decided to discuss the matter with him. Jason asked James about his relationship with Marie. James was honest and admitted to having a romantic relationship with both Marie and his wife. He revealed that he and Marie had a heated argument before her disappearance, which escalated into a physical fight. However, James insisted that Marie was alive and well at the time of her disappearance. Following their conversation, James decided to resign as pastor and soon left the city with his family, including Tanya and Grace, to move to Arizona. Shortly before their departure, Marie's family had contacted the Flanders family to collect some of Marie's belongings. As a result, investigators obtained Marie's phone, which may have contained crucial information. The investigation into Marie's disappearance was initially hindered because most of the data on James' phone had been deleted. However, investigators were able to recover some fragments, including a video of James promoting precious metals. This finding raised suspicions, particularly since the case took place in 2011, when digital evidence was easier to erase and surveillance was less widespread. At that time, DNA detection technologies were still in their infancy, making it seem like criminals could easily escape punishment. However, the field of digital forensics was also advancing, and it was this expertise that ultimately helped crack the case. 3 years after Marie vanished, a new program became available that enabled investigators to recover data from phones and computers. This technology allowed them to access messages between Marie and James, which painted a disturbing picture of their relationship. The recovered messages included explicit images, some of which were taken inside a church. Perhaps most damningly, Marie's emails to James revealed her deep desire to leave Fort Walton Beach, fearing the place was cursed. Her messages hinted at her desperation to escape with her child. A chain of unexpected and dramatic events led to the Flanders family's deepest secrets being exposed. Flanders said, "When someone spreads rumors or harms me, I want them to cease to exist." Given James' situation, shrouded in darkness and fear, it's possible he fulfilled this ominous promise. Despite the lack of Marie's body, there was sufficient evidence to issue an arrest warrant for James on charges of second-degree murder. However, the prosecutor faced a significant challenge, convincing the jury of James' guilt without the victim's body. James and his lawyer were in a desperate situation with an uncertain future ahead, so they made a drastic decision as a last resort to try and turn things around. If James revealed Marie's body's location, he would be charged with manslaughter, a crime with a more moderate sentence. After years of anguish, Marie's family agreed to this deal. James's words revealed a disturbing truth. He and Marie had a tumultuous relationship, frequently arguing about her struggles with depression. During one heated argument, Marie physically lashed out at James, and in an attempt to calm her down, he inadvertently knocked her to the ground. Tragically, she lost her life. In the aftermath, James was overcome with guilt and regret. He had unknowingly contributed to Marie's death, and his attempts to revive her were unsuccessful. The investigators eventually discovered Marie's body in the yard of James's house, buried 5 feet underground and wrapped in a blanket. The discovery was a shock to everyone involved, as they had been searching for her for years. The consequences of James's actions were severe. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 11 years. His wife, Tanya, claimed to have been unaware of James's crime and was deeply shocked by the news of Marie's death. Marie's body was discovered after a delay, which hindered experts from determining the cause of her death. This delayed discovery may have impacted the direction of the investigation. 5 years later, Marie's family and friends were finally able to lay her to rest and find closure at her funeral. Her sister Esther might have even sung a final song in her honor. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez Seguin. Abril Perez Seguin was born in 1971 in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. Her mother, Maria del Socorro, worked diligently 7 days a week to ensure her 3 children, Abril, Javier, and Ana, had the opportunity for the best possible education and a bright future. Even at a young age, Abril displayed an exceptional aptitude for science and made it her goal to pursue higher education and financial independence. As Abril matured, she embodied a unique combination of intelligence, compassion, and physical beauty. Her sociable nature and innate leadership qualities made her an inspiration to her friends and a standout professional in her field. She earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Nuevo León and a master's degree in business from the Monterrey Institute of Technology. As Abril's career progressed, she discovered her passion for digital sales and rapidly climbed the ranks. She attained a prominent position as an executive director at Bilbao Bank in the United States. During the early 1990s, a time when Abril's professional accomplishments were flourishing, she met Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez. Juan Carlos was an ambitious entrepreneur, born on November 11, 1968. Juan Carlos and Abril discovered they had a lot in common. Both had attended the Monterrey Institute of Science and Technology, where Abril studied and Juan Carlos earned his degree with high academic achievement. Juan Carlos had also studied at top U.S. universities, including the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard. With his education and experience, he considered himself a professional entrepreneur in e-commerce and financial technology. Juan and Abril became inseparable, collaborating on projects and socializing in the same friend circle. As time passed, their friendship blossomed into romance. After a few years of dating, they decided to tie the knot, and their wedding took place in 1994. Their collaboration led to numerous successful projects, including the online stores Pag Mobile and Plascom. They also played a key role in the development of the Dem store, which became a leading e-commerce platform in Mexico. By 1999, their life appeared to be a perfect fairy tale, with both partners achieving great success in their careers and enjoying a happy relationship. Their joy was further amplified with the birth of their first child, Ana Cecilia, in 2001. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Juan Carlos Jr., followed by another son, Julio Andres, in 2005. Despite their busy schedules, Abril prioritized her children's needs, taking care of them personally and attending their school activities. Abril's devotion earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. Juan Carlos was also a dedicated father, and together they created a seemingly ideal family that many people envied. However, behind the facade, The family was struggling with difficulties, and all members suffered due to Juan's short temper. Juan was a cruel man who frequently lashed out at anyone who crossed his path. His behavior towards his wife, Abril, began with verbal abuse, making her feel uncomfortable and hurt with his insulting words. Over time, the situation worsened, and Juan started using physical violence against Abril, regularly beating her. Abril attempted to conceal the abuse from her friends and family, fearing that she wouldn't be able to provide for their children on her own. She believed that staying with Juan would give their children a better future. However, by 2009, the situation had become so severe that others began to suspect what was happening in the family. Abril has always kept it a secret from her friends and family, but whenever they asked about a possible divorce, she insisted that she wouldn't leave Juan. By 2014, Juan had reached the pinnacle of his career, becoming a prominent figure in Amazon's retail industry in Mexico. A year later, when Juan became the director of Amazon in Mexico, the family had to relocate to Mexico City. Abril hoped that the change of scenery would resolve their problems, but unfortunately, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos presented himself as a loving husband and father to the public, but behind closed doors, he was abusive and controlling towards his wife, Abril. He would often post on social media about how much he loved her, but in reality, he was constantly accusing her of cheating and even hired a private investigator to gather evidence. Despite his successful career, which included becoming the director of e-commerce at a multinational company, his marriage was deteriorating. The tension between him and Abril became unbearable, and after a trip to Monterrey to celebrate Christmas with her family, she realized she couldn't stay in the marriage any longer. During the trip, Juan's anger boiled over, and he physically attacked Abril, grabbing her by the neck and strangling her. He had received a photo from the private investigator of Abril with a male colleague, which he mistakenly believed was her lover. In reality, the man was just a coworker. Abril decided not to engage with Juan's accusations and instead filed for divorce on January 4, 2019. They had already separated and planned to inform their children about their impending divorce. However, the situation took a violent turn one early morning. Abril was asleep when she was suddenly struck on the head with a baseball bat by her partner, Juan. Initially disoriented, Abril thought the ceiling had collapsed, but as her vision cleared, she saw Juan standing over her. She attempted to push him away and escape, but he overpowered her, prompting her to scream for help. Their 16-year-old son rushed to his mother's aid, quickly assessing the situation and intervening to prevent Juan from causing further harm. He managed to get Abril away from Juan and escorted her out of the house to seek emergency medical attention for her injuries. After the incident, Juan took to social media to share his side of the story. He made several posts claiming that Abril had been unfaithful, stolen his money, and wasted 26 years of his life. He also alleged that Abril had physically attacked him, stabbing him in the chest with a knife. To support his claims, he attached photos of the knife and what appeared to be bloodstains. One of Juan's friends responded by recording a video asking people to share the information. However, Juan's posts became increasingly bizarre. At one point, he even posted a message claiming that Abril had taken her life, despite being clearly alive. This move remains puzzling to this day. Meanwhile, Abril had been recovering in the hospital. After her discharge, she immediately filed a police report against her husband. The authorities sided with her, granting her custody of their 2 children and ordering Juan to pay 6,000 Mexican pesos, approximately $1,350, in monthly alimony. However, this amount was deemed insufficient to cover the costs of raising their 2 minors. After overcoming her initial fear and financial struggles, Abril began a new chapter in her life, driven by her determination to create a better future for her children. She relocated to Monterrey with her kids, where she attended Juan Carlos' trial and filed for divorce. Reflecting on her traumatic experience and the abuse she suffered, Abril reevaluated her life. She joined a Christian organization that supported families and started working as a divorce counselor. Her ultimate goal was to establish a support system for women who had endured similar abuse, just as she had. As Abril worked towards rebuilding her life, the court proceedings against Juan Carlos continued. 9 months after the attack, Juan was formally charged with attempted murder. The case was then brought to court, where Judge Federico Mask ordered Juan's informal arrest. Consequently, Juan was incarcerated for several weeks. Juan appealed the verdict, and on November 3, 2019, Judge Hector Jimenez reviewed the case. He found the hospital photographs and Abril's testimony, along with that of her son, insufficient to prove Juan's guilt. The judge also believed that if Juan had intended to kill Abril, he would have done so. Additionally, he considered the baseball bat used in the attack to be a blunt object, rather than a deadly weapon. As a result, the charges were downgraded, and the preliminary arrest was cancelled. With only a few hearings remaining, the outcome of the case was uncertain, causing Abril and her loved one significant anxiety and frustration. In a desperate attempt to have her concerns heard, Abril wrote to the judge, expressing her fears for her life and pleading for him to consider the threat Juan posed. However, her letter was ignored. Juan then began a custody battle for their children. Abril was forced to leave Monterrey and travel to Mexico City for the remaining hearings. She also had to subject her children to psychological evaluations, as Juan had claimed in his lawsuit that Abril had manipulated them into rejecting him. A week before a critical court hearing, Abril sat down with her 3 children to express her love and wishes for their future. She encouraged them to chase their dreams and find the strength to forgive their father. This conversation seemed like a farewell, as if Abril sensed that it might be her last opportunity to reassure her children of her love. On November 25, 2019, Abril followed her ex-husband's instructions to avoid potential legal issues that could have led to her separation from her children. She traveled to Mexico City, coincidentally on the same day that thousands of women marched in the streets to commemorate the International Day Against Gender-Based Violence on March 19, 2021. The court reclassified a case involving violence against Abril, which occurred in January 2019, as attempted murder. This decision was made after Abril's relatives and the prosecutor filed several petitions for judicial review, ultimately leading to the cancellation of the original decision. 2 months later, on May 23, the remaining suspects in Abril's murder case were apprehended, including 3 women and 1 man. The investigation resulted in the issuance of 3 search warrants and 8 arrest warrants. During the first search, 48-year-old Amanda Vicente Rodriguez was taken into custody. A series of arrests were made in connection with a recent crime. In the Jardín de Morelos colony, 34-year-old Mabel Montelier Morena and 48-year-old Garcia Alicia Flores Valdez were taken into custody, and their mobile phones were seized. Another arrest was made in the Alvar Aragon colony in Mexico City, where 50-year-old Isa Jalil Castillo, also known as Aguirre or Alvar's godmother, was detained. At the same time, 9 gang members were apprehended, with 7 of them allegedly linked to the Abril case. However, one suspect, Juan Carlos, remained at large, prompting authorities to reissue a warrant for his arrest. General Prosecutor Ernesto Godoy explained that the initial warrant was for attempted murder, while the new one was for the actual killing of a woman. Despite efforts to locate Juan, he remained elusive. In a surprising turn of events, a man named Rolf, also known as El Chalón, contacted the authorities and claimed to have information about the case. During questioning, he revealed that he was the one who had actually pulled the trigger and taken Abril's life. The perpetrator, Rodolfo Daniel Bendis, eventually pleaded guilty to the crime. He claimed that Juan Carlos had promised to pay him $10,000 to carry out the crime. According to Bendis, Juan Carlos had contacted him while he was in pre-trial detention and provided him with the address of Abril in Mexico City. Juan Carlos allegedly instructed Bendis to spy on Abril and provided written instructions on how to commit the crime. He also promised to provide Bendis with a gun in Monterrey. However, when Bendis arrived in Monterrey, no one contacted him, and he did not receive the gun. He returned to Mexico City and did not hear from Juan Carlos again until after his release from prison. Upon his release, Juan Carlos contacted Bendis again and informed him that the plan had changed. He now wanted Abril to be killed in Mexico City, as he had managed to lure her there. The case was divided into multiple hearings due to the complexity of the judicial system. The first trial began in August 2022, with Bendis and Juan Carlos as the initial defendants. During this trial, the prosecution presented 28 witness statements and 14 pieces of expert evidence. During the recent trial, a key defendant known as El Shung Galan testified about his role in planning and committing the crime of feminicide, for which he had previously pleaded guilty. On May 19, 2023, the court delivered its verdict, finding Rodolfo Danielo Baza and Juan Carlos Rodriguez guilty and sentencing them to 52 years in prison. Additionally, they were ordered to pay approximately 56,000 Mexican pesos, $30,000 US, in damages. Following the trial, the men were taken to a detention center to begin serving their sentences. However, the Abril family immediately announced their intention to appeal the verdict, as they believed the sentence was too lenient. They pointed out that Rodolfo was the one who fired the fatal shots. As for the remaining defendants, it was previously decided in October 2014 that their trials would be divided. This decision was met with an appeal from prosecutors, who argued that it would significantly delay the proceedings and result in unnecessary additional costs for the court. The tragic case of Abril continues to affect her family and the wider Mexican society, and despite the recent verdict, the trials are not yet over. After the court hearing, Abril got into a car with her children and their lawyer. She asked the lawyer to drive them to the airport for their flight back to Monterrey. En route, they stopped at an intersection, where a motorcyclist pulled up beside them. The motorcyclist, who was actually a hired assassin, shot Abril multiple times in the head. Luckily, her children, who were seated in the back, escaped serious harm. One child, who was lying down, was grazed by a bullet but suffered only minor injury. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to her injuries 6 hours later. The lawyer immediately contacted Abril's family to inform them of the tragedy. Her brother Javier traveled to Mexico City to handle the aftermath of the incident. The community suspected Juan Carlos of being involved in the crime, but the authorities took a different stance. Since the shooter's identity and motives were unknown, they couldn't classify the case as femicide and make an arrest. Instead, the case was initially treated as a murder, and the police launched an investigation to gather evidence that could potentially prove it was a femicide. Abril's friend took to social media to accuse Juan Carlos, but her account was deleted as a result. Abril's family was fearful that the perpetrator would go unpunished and sought to raise public awareness about the case through social media. The fact that Abril died on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence added a deeper significance to her death. The family organized protests and marches to demand justice for Abril. Following Abril's tragic death, social media erupted in outrage as people realized that she had repeatedly expressed her fear of her abuser, only to be ignored by the authorities. Her family and friends held a funeral mass at the Benito Flores Chapel in Monterrey, where dozens gathered to pay their respects and demand justice for Abril. The funeral procession then proceeded to the Pantheon Garden in Los Angeles, where Abril was laid to rest. Her case has sparked widespread attention to the issue of gender-based violence, particularly in cases where judges release men who have attacked women. Abril's ex-husband, Juan Carlos, was released from prison after appealing his sentence, and was able to track Abril down to Mexico City, where he ultimately took her life. In response to Abril's case, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office has launched an investigation into the judges who allowed Juan Carlos to be released from prison. The judges in question, Carlos Trillo Rodriguez, Federico Mosa Gonzalez, and Hector Jimenez Lopez, are being investigated for their roles in Juan Carlos' release. Additionally, representatives of the party of former Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador are calling for Judge Mosa's removal from office, citing his involvement in a previous controversial case in which he released a doctor who had disrespected a patient in a public hospital. The judge initially declined to charge Juan Carlos with femicide, instead only charging him with sexual violence, after which he was released from custody. During the public outcry surrounding the Abril case, Rafael Guerra, the president of the Supreme Court of Mexico City, suspended all judges involved in the case on November 29. Mexico City's head of government, Claudia Sheinbaum, stated that the government would investigate Abril's death. She also warned that the judges involved in the case could be held accountable for Abril's death if it was proven that Juan Carlos was responsible. Local and international media reported that Juan Carlos was released despite evidence against him. Abril's family established a non-profit organization called The Voice of Abril to provide support to victims of violence, including information, psychological assistance, and legal aid. The public demonstrations sparked by Abril's death prompted the prosecutor's office to reclassify the case against Juan Carlos, seeking to prosecute him for attempted murder, which could result in his imprisonment. After being charged, Juan Carlos took to social media to claim that he wanted justice for the crime against Abril and that the perpetrator should be punished. He also stated that he was willing to cooperate with the police, despite having a troubled marriage with Abril, and he would never have wanted her to meet such a tragic end. However, his post sparked widespread discontent among the community. His 18-year-old daughter, Ana Cecilia, publicly spoke out against her father, accusing him of physically and mentally abusing her, her siblings, and Abril over the years. She shared disturbing photos of Abril's injuries after being attacked with a baseball bat. Ana described her father as a narcissistic sociopath who allegedly bribed his way out of prison. During the ongoing investigation and protests, an arrest warrant was issued for Juan Carlos, but it was not directly related to the Abril case. Instead, it was due to him violating judicial duties. Although he was released on the condition that he would check in with the police station weekly, he failed to do so. After missing 2 court hearings, Judge Agustin Monra Gaspar Canel was left with no choice but to issue the order. Juan wrote a letter claiming he feared for his life and did not want to attend the hearings, stating he and his family had received death threats since Abril's death. He believed someone would seek revenge if he appeared in court. However, the judge rejected this excuse and issued an arrest warrant, also restricting Juan from leaving the country. The investigation continued, aiming to uncover the truth. A letter from Juan was discovered, in which he again denied involvement in Abril's death, claiming he never intended to harm her. He described the night of the incident, stating that Abril had initiated a fight, stabbing him in the side, and he had hit her with a bat in self-defense. The letter sparked outrage among those who heard it, with no one believing Juan's account. The investigation has revealed that Juan Carlos is the primary suspect in the case. Further investigation by the police has identified at least 7 other individuals involved in the crime against Abril. This conclusion was reached after reviewing surveillance footage from the area where the events occurred. The footage shows 2 cars following Abril as she left the courthouse. The drivers of these cars were in contact with the perpetrator who fatally shot Abril. After the attack, the perpetrator and their cars fled the scene. Although the identities of the pursuers were not yet known at the time, the investigation suggested that Juan Carlos may have been involved in the crime. According to investigators, Juan Carlos likely met these individuals while he was in prison and paid one of them to protect him. After his associates were released from prison, Juan Carlos was also released. He then paid them to kill Abril. Notably, Juan Carlos was the only one who knew Abril's route to Mexico City, as he had requested to meet her. After the shocking details of the case became public, no law firm was willing to defend the suspect, Juan Carlos. Meanwhile, Abril's loved ones and colleagues cooperated fully with law enforcement, providing any information that could aid in his capture. However, sources from the General Prosecutor's Office soon revealed that Juan Carlos had managed to flee Mexico by crossing the border into the United States. Mexican authorities swiftly alerted Interpol, which launched a global manhunt for Juan Carlos. As a result, he became a wanted man in over 151 countries, with authorities determined to apprehend him at all costs. By the end of January 2024, the case had gone cold, with no new leads or updates. 4 years have passed since Abril's tragic death, yet the true perpetrators remain unpunished. Her children are now living with her family on the outskirts of Mexico City, holding on to the hope that justice will eventually be served. The question on everyone's mind remains, where is Juan Carlos? His capture is still the top priority for the authorities. Abril's family has vowed to continue fighting for justice until Juan Carlos is found and brought to justice. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Celia Barquin. On Monday, September 17, 2018, in Ames, Iowa, the weather was warm and clear. Celia Barquin Arozamena, a 22-year-old university student, decided to play golf at Coldwater Golf Links Club before her classes. During her drive to the course, she spoke with her mother, who expressed concern for her safety. Despite her confidence, Celia's day took a devastating turn. Although the golf course was crowded, she became the victim of a horrific crime. Born on July 6, 1996, in Point San Miguel, a small village in northern Spain, Celia had moved to Iowa on a golf scholarship, leaving behind a family that had lived in the village for 8 generations. Celia, a talented athlete, had numerous university options offering her a tuition-free education. However, she chose to attend a university in Ames, Iowa, a quiet and cozy town with a population of 65,000, which reminded her of her hometown in Spain. At the time, she had no idea that this decision would have severe consequences and that Ames would become her final refuge. Celia was very close to her family, who remained in her home country. Her parents, Maria Rosa and Marcos Barquin, had 2 children, Celia and her sibling Andres. Her father worked as a butcher, while her mother initially worked in a clothing store as a salesperson. After the children were born, she became a full-time homemaker, dedicating herself to raising the children and managing the household. The family lived a modest life, but they were a close-knit and supportive one. Their children's well-being and education were their top priority. Andres pursued a career in law, while Celia, who had a natural talent for golf, earned a scholarship to study in the United States. Celia had a clear goal in mind: to buy a house for her family and take care of them. To achieve this, she worked hard and practiced diligently to excel in her sport. Her efforts paid off, earning her numerous titles and awards in various competitions. Notably, she won the European Women's Amateur Championship in Slovenia in June 2018, came in second in the European Women's Team Golf Competition, and was crowned the 2018 Confederation Big 12 Women's Golf Champion in the United States. She was also named the 2018 Iowa State Athlete of the Year. With her impressive achievements, Celia's future looked bright, and many had high expectations for her. Despite moving to the United States, Celia remained close to her family. She made it a point to call her parents every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Whenever she had free time, she would feel homesick and miss her family dearly. During her vacations, Celia would visit her family in Spain. Even on her home country breaks, she continued to work tirelessly to refine her skills. Her mother was a strong supporter of her daughter's passion and often joined her in training sessions. Celia had a comfortable life in Iowa, where she lived with her boyfriend, Carlos Nagri-Nablas, in a rented apartment. Their relationship had an interesting backstory. They met in university, where Celia was already in a relationship with someone else. Despite this, Carlos was immediately smitten with her. Her captivating smile, kind nature, and determined personality drew him in, and he came to greatly respect her perseverance. Although she wasn't available at the time, Carlos became her closest friend and confidant, always offering support and encouragement. For over a year, Carlos supported his friend Celia through her tumultuous relationship with her boyfriend. When she finally broke up with him, Carlos confessed his long-held feelings to her. After a walk together, Celia revealed her own feelings by pulling Carlos close and kissing him. Overjoyed by her reciprocation, Carlos ran through the dormitory, screaming with happiness. This marked the beginning of their romance. To celebrate, Carlos set off fireworks and sent Celia a heartfelt video, expressing his admiration for her. As their relationship blossomed, they became inseparable. Eventually, they decided to take the next step and move in together. Carlos and Celia were busy preparing for their future together, having already gotten engaged. In May 2017, Carlos graduated from college and landed a job at an engineering firm in Ames. Meanwhile, Celia was nearing the end of her senior year at Iowa State University, where she was also studying civil engineering. After retiring from athletics, Celia had her sights set on a career in engineering, driven by a desire to make a positive impact and prove that women could thrive in a traditionally male-dominated field. Celia spent the summer of 2018 in Spain with her family before returning to Iowa to graduate. As a member of the Iowa State women's golf team, she was a promising athlete who also competed individually. She was preparing for an upcoming competition, but her plans were about to take a devastating turn. On September 17, 2018, Celia arrived at the golf club after speaking with her mother. The staff, familiar with the talented athlete, informed her that a group of 15 older men from Des Moines would be playing golf at 8:45. The group was assigned to the starting line near the first 4 holes. As they arrived in golf carts and began to play, Celia took notice of them. A group of retirees invited Celia to begin her round, so she proceeded with her cart, opting to play the first hole followed by the 4th to avoid delaying the older men. They found her to be courteous and friendly. Next, Celia headed to the 7th hole, a location not favored by many due to its remote position relative to the other holes and its proximity to Squaw Creek Park, which featured dense foliage. Athletes were often hesitant to play at the 7th hole because it occasionally attracted unauthorized visitors, including homeless individuals who could be aggressive. However, Celia was new to the club and unaware of the situation, so she played the 7th hole to make her way to the 9th. The route involved crossing a bridge on a broad path before navigating a wooded section, a place one coach described as eerily similar to the atmosphere of Sleepy Hollow. At 10:30 a.m., a group of 15 people made their way to the area where Celia's belongings were left. To their surprise, her cart was still there, but Celia was nowhere to be found. The group decided to investigate further as they found it unusual that she didn't reappear after 10 minutes. As they approached her cart, they discovered some of Celia's belongings scattered on the field, including her t-shirt and baseball cap, while her phone remained on the cart. It appeared that some items had fallen out of her pocket, but it was unclear why her t-shirt was on the ground and why she had left her phone behind. After searching the surrounding area, the group couldn't find any sign of Celia. They immediately alerted the club management to report their disturbing findings. A group of people reported that a young, blonde girl had been playing golf at the course earlier, but she was now nowhere to be found, and her belongings were still on the ground. Upon investigation, staff realized that she was Celia, the reigning European golf champion. A search was launched, and less than 30 minutes later, a body was spotted floating in a pond near the 9th hole. This discovery prompted the staff to call the police immediately. Upon recovering the body from the water, police officers identified the victim as Celia Barkin. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered multiple stab wounds to her neck and torso. A search dog was brought in and quickly picked up a scent, leading the police to a tent in a wooded area of Squaw Creek Park. Although the tent was empty, it contained bloodstains, suggesting that the perpetrator may have been hiding there. Police suspected that a homeless person, possibly living in the tent, might have been responsible for the attack. The police were searching for the perpetrator and found a man near the tent. The man claimed to live in the area and just wanted to retrieve his tent. As it turned out, the man was Colin Richards, 22 years old, the same age as Celia. Despite their similar ages, they couldn't be more different. However, it became clear that Colin was responsible for the murder. Physical evidence incriminated him. His face was badly scratched, and his black backpack contained bloody clothes, including a t-shirt and shorts. The clothes indicated that he had recently changed out of his blood-soaked garments and into clean ones. The police dogs also picked up his scent. Additionally, Colin had a severe gash on his left arm that was bleeding. Although he tried to hide the injury and conceal his arm from the officers, his efforts only added to their suspicions. Colin Richards was arrested by police in connection with the crime. According to his account, he was at a friend's house before the police arrived. Two male friends had driven him to the park to collect his tent, and it was there that he encountered the police. Collins denied any involvement in the crime and claimed he had never met the victim, Celia. He explained the scratches on his face by saying he had scratched himself on branches while walking through a wooded area. Colin had a history with the police, having struggled with substance abuse, alcoholism, and mental health issues. He had become homeless after being released from prison 3 months prior to the murder, having served a 7-month sentence for burglary. Colin had a history of run-ins with the law, having been convicted multiple times for similar offenses. His troubled past began in his teenage years, and he grew up in a dysfunctional family. Detectives interviewed 3 acquaintances of Colin's, including a homeless man with whom he shared a tent. 2 other men gave Colin a ride from his home to the park. The homeowner allowed Colin to clean up and change his clothes, as he was disheveled and covered in mud, blood, sand, and water. After washing up and changing, Colin left with his bloody clothes in a backpack, intending to return to the park to retrieve his tent before leaving the area. The men described Colin's behavior that day as unusual, extremely nervous, and hurried. He didn't explain why he was in such a rush, only mentioning that he had cut himself and soiled his clothes. One of the homeless men who lived with Colin in the park revealed that Colin always carried a serrated knife, which he used for personal protection. The day before the murder, Colin had confided in this friend about having a desire to rape and kill someone, but the friend didn't take him seriously. Colin was immediately charged with first-degree murder after her body was discovered. The investigators believed that the crime was premeditated, meaning Colin had planned it ahead of time and was actively looking for a victim on the day of the murder. The judge set Colin's bail at $5 million, but since he couldn't afford it, he remained in custody until his trial. Meanwhile, Celia's family in Spain was growing increasingly worried because they hadn't heard from her. Despite numerous attempts by the police and aims to reach them, it was too late at night in Spain and no one was available to receive the devastating news. Eventually, the coach was forced to make the heartbreaking call to Celia's parents, informing them that their daughter had been brutally murdered. A serrated knife was discovered in a wooded area, bearing the fingerprints and DNA of Colin, as well as the blood of the deceased. Additionally, skin particles from Colin were found under the victim's fingernails, indicating that the scratches on his body were inflicted by the victim during a struggle, not by branches. Initially, Colin denied any involvement in the crime, but later, faced with overwhelming evidence, he confessed to the attack. He claimed that he had been under the influence of substances on the day of the incident and was not thinking clearly. Colin stated that he had been walking in the woods when he came across a young girl, Celia, who was alone in the area. He targeted her, having never seen or known her before, and subjected her to a violent attack. The death penalty was abolished in Iowa in 1965, so the maximum sentence Colin faced was life imprisonment without parole. During the trial, Colin's family shared details about his life. His parents were not married and did not live together when he was born. For the first 10 years of his life, Colin lived with his father, who raised him in a strict and often neglectful manner. His father would frequently leave him alone at night to go to the bar, and it was actually his grandparents who provided Colin with care and support. When Colin was 10, his mother, who had since married another man and had 2 more children, gained custody of him. The family moved to the countryside, seeking a more peaceful environment. However, their household was still marked by strict discipline. Colin's room was extremely tidy, leading his family to jokingly suggest that he would be well suited for a career in the military. Colin started out as a diligent student, but as he entered his teenage years, he began to follow in the footsteps of his father, a heavy drinker. Despite his father's attempts to set him straight, Colin's behavior worsened, leading to his expulsion from the family home at the age of 15. Without a stable support system, Colin fell in with a bad crowd, dropped out of school, and became addicted to substances. At 18, Colin was involved with a girlfriend significantly older than him. However, their relationship turned violent, and he was arrested for domestic abuse in May 2015. He was found guilty and served a 60-day jail sentence. On another occasion, Colin was accused of shoplifting, responded by threatening to return and carry out a violent act. Despite his downward spiral, those around him seemed to ignore his problems. Over the next 2 years following the domestic violence incident, Colin had multiple run-ins with the law, being arrested for various offenses such as theft, harassment, and attempted burglary. In an attempt to address his behavioral issues, he was ordered to take intervention courses, but these efforts were unsuccessful. In November 2017, Colin began serving a 2-year sentence at Mount Pleasant Correctional Facility for burglary in violating his probation. However, due to the facility being over capacity, he was paroled in June 2018 after only serving 7 months of his sentence, despite exhibiting disciplinary problems, including engaging in fights with other inmates. Sadly, Colin went on to commit a heinous crime just 3 months later, killing Celia. After his release from prison, Colin reunited with his mother and stepfather, with whom he resided, and resumed a relationship that had been rekindled through correspondence during his incarceration. Colin's parents gave him a chance to start anew, trusting that he would stay away from illicit substances and old friends with a bad influence. However, he broke this promise just 2 weeks later and was subsequently kicked out of his home. With nowhere to go, Colin traveled to Ames, a city an hour away, where he initially sought refuge in the local homeless shelter. Unfortunately, the shelter was full, and he had to find alternative accommodations. Colin's mother helped him out by purchasing a tent, which became his temporary home. However, his presence in Ames soon caught the attention of the local police department. On June 29th, Colin was arrested for public intoxication. Later, on August 11th, police received a complaint from a Target store about Colin and another homeless man camping in the store's parking lot. After being chased away, they men relocated to Squaw Creek Park, where they could camp without disturbing others. There is a discrepancy between Colin's account and the police's statement regarding his camping in the park. Colin claims that the police allowed him to camp there, but the police representatives deny this and assert that overnight camping in the park is prohibited. They also claim that Colin was not given permission to camp and that he was breaking the law if he did so. On September 8th, Colin's mother and stepfather visited him in Ames to celebrate his 22nd birthday. During their time together, they took him out to dinner and did his laundry. However, his mother became concerned about his behavior, as he was distant and gave brief, muted responses to their questions. After dropping him off at the tent in the park where he was living with another man, Colin's parents returned home. Unbeknownst to them, Colin would soon confess to a friend that he had been thinking about raping and killing a woman. Tragically, the next morning, Celia was found dead, although it was later determined that she had not been raped. The police suggested that Colin likely did not have sufficient time to commit both crimes. Following his arrest and trial, Colin's parents expressed their regret that they could not have done more to stop him. As a result, Colin was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on August 23, 2019. He is currently serving his sentence at the Story County Jail in Nevada, Iowa. The town of Ames was deeply saddened by Celia's tragic death, with thousands attending a candlelight vigil to pay tribute to the gifted athlete. Her family was devastated by the news of her murder, feeling a sense of injustice that her life had been taken by someone who had achieved nothing and had no aspirations, whereas Celia had shown great promise and had a bright future ahead of her. Celia's parents have preserved her room as a memorial, with the addition of an engineering degree that was awarded to her posthumously by the state of Iowa. They often visit the local golf club, where Celia learned to play golf, and reminisce about happy times. The circumstances surrounding the safety measures implemented by the golf club for holes 7 and 17 following the incident are unclear. Carlos, Celia's boyfriend, found it unbearable to remain in the city where constant reminders of her presence made his grief unbearable. He relocated to Florida, and his life after that remains a mystery. Celia's brother was deeply affected by her death, losing a significant amount of weight due to stress. However, he found solace in a career driven by his sister's encouragement to help others. He pursued a law degree and subsequently joined the police force. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. Grant Hendrickson, born on September 20, 1972, in Macon, Georgia, was an outdoor enthusiast who enjoyed fishing, golf, canoeing, and camping. Like his girlfriend, he was also an active volunteer in the community, having worked at the Museum of Arts and Sciences in Macon since the age of 15. Their active lifestyles likely drew them together, according to those who knew them. Grant's girlfriend, Michelle Cartagena, was born on May 2, 1975, in Monterey, California. She was a well-rounded and talented individual. She played in her school's marching orchestra band, was the top singles tennis player, and led her school's softball team. Additionally, she was a member of the National Honor Society. Outside of school, Michelle volunteered with the Red Cross and an animal welfare association, and she often visited elderly people. Her father remembered her as a caring and driven individual who aimed to pursue a career in medicine to help others and give back to society. January 3, 1995, brought a grim discovery to the typically quiet area of Juliet Lake. A passerby reported finding 2 lifeless bodies while walking near the lake. The local sheriff and his deputy responded to the scene, where they were met with a shocking sight. Their office was not accustomed to handling serious crimes, as fights and thefts were the norm. The deputies were not prepared for what they found: a white Honda parked on the lake's shore, with the body of a man inside and her body lying on the ground nearby. The cause of death was evident, even to a non-expert. Both victims had been shot. The car contained the victims' personal belongings, including identification, which revealed the identities of the victims. The male victim was 22-year-old Grant Hendrickson, who was found in the driver's seat. The second victim was 19-year-old Michelle Cartagena. The police were alerted to the incident, and officers from the Major Crimes Unit, along with forensic experts, arrived at the lake. The detectives' attention was immediately drawn to Michelle's body, which was partially exposed with her skirt pulled up, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. An examination of the car revealed bullet holes, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator had opened fire on them while they were inside. Grant was hit by 3 bullets and had no chance of survival. Michelle was shot twice and likely remained conscious as the perpetrator pulled her from the car. The position of Michelle's body, with her legs spread apart, suggested that the perpetrator may have intended to take advantage of her vulnerable state, but did not do so. Forensic experts found a substance on the inside of her thighs, which was later identified as saliva containing chewing tobacco particles. The saliva samples were sent to the lab for further analysis. During the crime scene investigation, police discovered important evidence, including bullet casings of 2 different calibers, 13.223 caliber casings and 4 9mm casings. The presence of 2 types of ammunition suggests that there may have been 2 perpetrators, each using a different weapon. The families of Grant and Michelle were shocked and stunned when they learned about the tragedy. They struggled to comprehend who could have committed such a heinous act against their children. As only children, Grant and Michelle were extremely close to their parents. They had been dating for over a year and had already made plans for their future together, including their upcoming wedding. When detectives couldn't identify any enemies or suspects through family and friends, they began investigating further. They visited Mercer University in Macon, where Grant and Michelle were classmates, to gather more information and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. The police investigation into the deaths of Michelle and Grant was ongoing, but they had not uncovered any significant leads. Both victims were well-liked and respected at the university, with no known conflicts or enemies. Initially, detectives considered the possibility that the killer might have been a man who had romantic feelings for Michelle and was rejected, but this theory was not substantiated and was eventually set aside. A visit to Mercer University did not yield any useful information for the police. However, by reconstructing the events of January 2nd, the detectives learned that Michelle and Grant had gone to a restaurant, followed by a movie. After the film, they headed to a holiday camp at Juliet Lake. The camp was open to the public 24/7 and featured a boat launch, parking area, small dock, and picnic tables. Since it was a free public space, there was no staff or security present on the night of the crime. Other people were in the area, but they did not report anything suspicious. Some individuals did hear loud noises, which they initially dismissed as firecrackers. A witness reported seeing a 1980s Honda CRX speeding out of the parking lot. Meanwhile, investigators found a DNA sample in saliva on Michelle's thigh. However, at the time, DNA technology was still in its early stages. The DNA Identification Act, which allowed the FBI to create a national DNA database, was not passed until 1994. As a result, there was no database to compare the DNA sample to, and it could only be matched by directly comparing it to the perpetrator's DNA. The investigation also included questioning staff at the restaurant and cinema that Grant and Michelle visited before their deaths, but nothing suspicious was found. The authorities considered the possibility that they might have been random victims or had a chance encounter with someone who became violent. The detectives found no evidence of any other motives, as they had good grades, no connections to shady individuals, and did not use illicit substances. The fact that the perpetrator left behind valuables, including money, suggests that the motive behind the crime was not financial gain, but rather something else. Forensic analysis revealed that the likely weapons used in the crime were an AR-15 rifle and a 9mm Ruger pistol. Despite questioning over 100 individuals and collecting DNA samples from several dozen potential suspects, the investigation had stalled. More than a year and a half after the crime, Agent Randy Upton of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation took over the case in the fall of 1996. Randy adopted a new approach, shifting his focus from identifying the perpetrator to locating the weapon used in the crime. He visited the largest gun store in Macon and requested a list of customers who had purchased an AR-15 rifle between 1985 and 1995. Investigator Randy started contacting individuals on the list of 108 potential suspects. He explained to them that cooperating by allowing their weapon to be inspected and providing a DNA sample would greatly aid the investigation. Most of the people Randy spoke with agreed to comply, which led to the experts conducting further tests. As a result, the list of suspects began to dwindle. On November 27, 1996, Randy contacted Andrew Allen Cook, a 22-year-old who was on the list. During their conversation, Randy informed Andrew of the purpose of the call and asked permission to examine his rifle. However, Andrew claimed he no longer owned the rifle, stating that he had sold it in April 1994, nearly a year before the victims, Grant and Michelle, died. Nonetheless, gun store records showed that this was not possible, as Andrew had actually purchased the rifle in August 1994. Agent Randy became suspicious when Andrew lied to him. When Randy asked Andrew for a DNA sample, Andrew claimed he needed to discuss it with his father, simultaneously an FBI agent, before complying. Instead, Andrew hung up. This evasive behavior made Randy think that Andrew might be the person he was searching for. Investigations revealed that 5 months after Grant and Michelle's murders in 1995, Andrew pawned his rifle at a local gun store. Additionally, in December 1993, someone had bought a Ruger pistol on Andrew's behalf because he was underage at the time. Andrew sold this pistol to a friend in July 1995, shortly after pawning his rifle. This sequence of events suggested that Andrew's decision to get rid of both his rifle and pistol within 6 months of the murders was unlikely to be a coincidence. As the police gathered more information about Andrew, they became increasingly confident that they were on the right track. Further investigation revealed that Andrew had not only disposed of his firearms but also his 1987 Honda CRX, which matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. Agent Randy decided to visit the diaper factory where Andrew worked. Although Andrew was absent, Randy spoke with one of his coworkers. A colleague of Andrew's reported that they had recently discussed the worst things they had ever done, and Andrew claimed to have shot someone with a rifle. The colleague was skeptical but asked Andrew why he had done it, and Andrew replied that he wanted to see if he could get away with it. The colleague also mentioned that Andrew was a frequent user of chewing tobacco. Another friend testified that Andrew had told him in late November 1996 that he needed to leave town because things were getting hot. These coincidences caught the attention of Agent Randy, who began searching for Andrew Cook, who had not lived with his parents for several years. On December 4, 1996, Agent Randy met with Andrew's father, John, who was also an FBI agent with 29 years of experience. Agent Randy explained that he was investigating the crime at Juliet Lake and wanted to speak with Andrew, but couldn't find him. John was familiar with the case of Grant and Michelle from the news, but had not been involved in the investigation. He told Agent Randy that he didn't consider Andrew a suspect, but promised to find him and talk to him. Later that day, John was able to reach Andrew by phone. John Cook's world was turned upside down when his son, Andrew, revealed a shocking truth. A detective had been searching for Andrew in connection with a crime at Juliet Lake, and John had asked his son if he knew anything about it. Andrew's response was devastating. "Daddy, I'm not telling you. You're one of them, you're a cop." John's next question was laced with hope that his son would deny any involvement. "Were you the one who did the shooting?" he asked. After a brief pause, Andrew confirmed his worst fears, saying yes. Andrew explained that he had been fishing at Juliet Lake on the night of the incident. A couple had arrived, and he had gotten into an argument with the driver, Grant. According to Andrew, Grant had threatened him with a pistol, prompting Andrew to grab his rifle and commit an irreversible act. John urged his son to turn himself in to the authorities, but Andrew refused, saying he would rather disappear. John was stunned by his son's confession, but he maintained his professional composure. The next day, he visited the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and reported his son's confession. At the time, no one was aware that Andrew had been arrested earlier that morning in a nearby county for illegally hunting deer in Turkey. He had given a false name, but his true identity was quickly discovered by Agent Randy. Randy then traveled to Jones County to speak with Andrew. Unbeknownst to Randy, Andrew had already confessed everything to his father the day before. When Randy arrived at the Jones County Sheriff's Office, he introduced himself and asked Andrew if he would be willing to answer a few questions. Andrew responded, "It's been 2 years, and you still don't have any evidence. I used to own a Honda, a rifle, and a Ruger, but now you're just trying to frame me." Andrew told the sheriff that if they helped his father get a lawyer, he would reveal the entire truth. After being transferred to Monroe County, Andrew's father, John, was allowed a private conversation with him. When John hugged his son, both men broke down in tears. Andrew confessed to his father that he wasn't at the lake to fish on the night of the crime. Instead, he claimed to have arrived after the victims, Grant and Michelle, were already there. Andrew's story went that he had fired multiple shots from his rifle, then used his pistol to fire additional shots. He then pulled Michelle's body out of the car in an attempt to mislead the police. As an extra precaution, Andrew spat on Michelle to prevent the police from linking him to the crime through saliva analysis. Andrew was subsequently charged with the murders of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. The police gathered additional evidence to support his confession, including tracing the ownership of the rifle and pistol used in the crime. Forensic examination of the guns confirmed that they were indeed the ones used to kill Michelle and Grant. Andrew Cook's DNA was matched to the saliva found on Michelle's body, further implicating him in the crime. The trial took place in 1998, during which John Andrew, Andrew's father, spoke and apologized to the families of the victims, Grant and Michelle. He acknowledged that his apologies would not bring them peace and expressed regret for not recognizing the evil that had consumed his son. Andrew Cook was found guilty on March 19, 1998, and was sentenced to death. He exhausted all his appeals, and the execution was scheduled for February 22, 2013. However, 3 days before the scheduled execution, Andrew's attorneys filed a clemency appeal, arguing that he was mentally unstable and required treatment. The State Board of Pardons and Paroles considered the appeal but ultimately voted against clemency. On February 22, 2013, Andrew Cook's family visited him in prison to bid their final farewell. Before his execution, he was granted the opportunity to choose his last meal, which consisted of a steak, baked potatoes, fried shrimp, lemon pie, and soda. As he lay strapped to a gurney in the death chamber, Andrew delivered his final words, expressing remorse for his actions. "I'm sorry," he said. "I won't ask you to forgive me, as I struggle to forgive myself." He then thanked his family for their unwavering support and apologized for the pain he had caused them, stating, "I'm sorry I took so much from you all." At 11:08 p.m., the lethal injection was administered. 14 minutes later, Andrew Cook, 38, was pronounced dead. Following the execution, Mary Hendrickson, the mother of one of the victims, expressed relief that justice had finally been served after 18 long years. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Tara Baker. Tara Baker was born on January 20th, 1977, in East Point, Georgia. Her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother later remarried. She is the eldest of 4 siblings. From an early age, she showed a strong interest in the legal system, with the desire to pursue a career as a lawyer or judge. She would often engage in mock trials with her stuffed animals, create contracts with her relatives, and even write letters to politicians, including the President of the United States, to express her opinions. After high school, Tara attended Georgia College, where she earned 2 bachelor's degrees in just 3 years, graduating in 1999. She then enrolled at the University of Georgia, one of the top law schools in the country, located in Athens, a small town close to her parents' home. To avoid dorm life, Tara rented a house with 2 other university students, one of whom she knew from college. Tara worked at a prestigious law firm in downtown Athens, covering her expenses and gaining valuable experience in her future profession. In January 2001, Tara spent a lot of time studying at the university library. On the evening of January 18th, she went to the library to study with a friend. Her friend left the library around 7:30 p.m. Tara stayed behind, calling her friend at 9:46 p.m. to check if she had arrived home safely, mentioning that she would head home soon. The next day, around 6 p.m., Tara's mother, Virginia Baker, received a phone call from a woman who identified herself as a detective. The detective tells Virginia that they need her daughter Tara's fingerprints for their current investigation. Believing it was a prank, Virginia hung up, but her curiosity got the better of her. She decided to call the Athens police station to verify the call. Police said the caller was actually a forensic detective, and they further informed her that there had been a fire at Tara's home. The detective explained that they were trying to locate Tara, but so far, they had only found one of Tara's roommates, who had been out at the time of the fire. The other roommate was also missing, and investigators suspected that the unidentified body they found might be one of them. Virginia was desperate for information and asked the detective to describe the room where the body was found. The detective's response sent a chill down Tara's spine. The room was filled with Tara antique items, which she had spent years collecting. Virginia and her family immediately drove to Athens to see what was happening to their daughter, hoping that it was just a misunderstanding and that Tara was safe. Upon arriving at the police station, they were forced to wait for several hours without receiving any updates. Eventually, a detective emerged and delivered the devastating news. The body found in the house was indeed Tara's, and her death was a result of murder, not the fire. However, the detective was exhausted and declined to answer any questions. Before departing, he shared one crucial detail: Tara had inadvertently left behind a clue. Fragments of the perpetrator's skin were found under her fingernails, which could potentially aid in identifying the killer. Tara's family was shocked, confused, and hopeless by the news. Despite their requests for more information about Tara, the police remained silent, not providing any further details. The family of Tara Baker was left in the dark about her murder investigation. Despite their repeated attempts to get information from detectives, they were met with silence. The local police department never reached out to them, forcing the family to constantly call and visit the station to beg for updates. Through persistence, they were able to gather some details about the case. Firefighters were called to Tara's address on January 19th at approximately 11 a.m. in response to a fire. After extinguishing the flames, they found Tara's body inside. The medical examiner's report confirmed that she had been murdered, with signs of strangulation and stab wounds. It appeared that the killer had set the fire to destroy evidence after Tara's death. However, the police refused to share the medical examiner's report with Tara's parents, leaving them without crucial information about her murder. The family also discovered that some evidence may have been destroyed by the firefighters. Unfortunately, this is not uncommon in cases like this. Investigators may not have properly secured the crime scene, which could have resulted in the loss of evidence. As Tara's family sought answers about her death, they were met with a lack of transparency and disrespect from the police. They were not kept informed about the investigation, were often treated rudely and unprofessionally. In an attempt to hold the police accountable, they began to record their conversations and filed complaints, but these efforts yielded no results. The family sought the advice of a renowned criminologist. However, the local police department would only allow him to review the case materials under one condition: he was not to share any information or findings with Tara's relatives. This left Tara's family unable to find answers about her death. Tara's family waited 10 years to get her death certificate. After writing to the state governor, they finally received it, but it didn't give them the answers they were looking for. Instead of explaining what caused her death, the certificate simply stated that she died from multiple injuries, without providing any further details. Despite the police continued their investigation, but their actions raised several questions. When Tara's body was discovered, firefighters immediately called the police, recognizing that a murder had taken place. But the crime scene was seriously destroyed due to extensive damage from the fire and water used to extinguish it. Furthermore, the family later discovered that some surviving items at the crime scene were not examined for fingerprints. Tara's laptop was found missing from her room, but other valuables were intact. Since there was no evidence of forced entry, investigators suspected that Tara was familiar with her killer and had voluntarily allowed them into her room. Although the crime scene was heavily damaged due to the fire, investigators established that Tara's 2 roommates were away from town at the time, leaving Tara home alone. Because it was difficult to determine the exact time of death, medical experts narrowed the window down to a time frame of 10 p.m., when Tara left the library, to 11 a.m., when neighbors called the fire department. The likelihood of the crime occurring during the early morning hours, given the speed at which the fire spread. The police investigation uncovered 2 significant leads. One involved a witness who reported seeing a middle-aged white man running down the street on the morning of the murder, wearing only a t-shirt and jeans despite the winter weather. Additionally, the police discovered a suspicious phone call made to Tara's university a few days before her death. A heavily intoxicated man had called the university's student information line. The man managed to correctly provide Tara Baker's name and request her phone number. Although the phone call was highly suspicious, the police were unable to identify the caller. Meanwhile, Tara's boyfriend became an immediate person of interest in the investigation. He provided an alibi, which was verified by the police, but they continued to view him with suspicion. Police have repeatedly questioned him and asked him to provide additional biological samples, answer additional questions, or undergo a lie detector test. Tara's boyfriend was asked to identify her body after the fire. He had traveled from another city to Athens as soon as he heard the news. Although Tara's parents were already in town, the police requested that the boyfriend make the identification. However, he was not allowed to enter the house. Instead, a police officer took a photograph of the body and showed it to him on a camera screen. The boyfriend was shocked and unsure if the body was Tara's. To confirm, he asked to see a pair of earrings he had given her. The officer retrieved the earrings from the body Tara's and showed them to him. After seeing the earrings, the boyfriend confirmed that the body was indeed Tara's. The police then shifted their focus to a male student who had a reputation for being troublesome. Several female students reported that he had repeatedly asked them out on dates, despite being told no, and made them feel uncomfortable with his behavior. The student had also asked Tara out multiple times, despite knowing she had a boyfriend. Detectives investigated the student but found no evidence linking him to the crime. They even asked Tara's friends to monitor the boy's activities, but this did not bring any new progress. detectives began to focus on another suspect, a guy who was Tara's co-worker. When they interviewed his co-workers, they discovered that his behavior in the days leading up to the murders was very strange. Specifically, he had stopped socializing with a group of close co-workers. Additionally, just days before the murders, he had told Tara that he would not be able to attend her birthday party, which was scheduled for the day after the murders. On the morning of January 19th, one of Tara's co-workers tried to convince him to attend birthday celebration, as Tara had been hurt by his initial refusal. When the colleague visited the attorney's office, however, he was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as the attorney was typically present at the office in the mornings. A check of his work schedule revealed no meetings or appointments, adding to the mystery of his absence. His behavior raised suspicions after Tara's murder. He was absent on the day of the murder, but the next day, he visited a colleague's home and acted strangely. Many suspect that he regularly used illegal drugs, which may have contributed to his erratic behavior. The co-worker noticed several fresh scratches on his neck, which were notable because several pieces of skin were found under Tara's fingernails, suggesting that she may have scratched her attacker in self-defense. When questioned about the scratches, he claimed he got them from a cat and denied any involvement in Tara's murder. However, when asked about his suspicions regarding the killer, his response was unusual. He screams that Tara's father is the culprit, but he cannot produce any evidence to back up his accusation. Furthermore, he resigned from his position just a few months after the murder and left the state. It is unclear whether the police compared his DNA with the samples found under Tara's nails. But they have not shared any information about this aspect of the investigation, even with Tara's relatives. The police discovered that he was married, but still secretly dated two female colleagues. This revelation could explain his unusual behavior and unexplained absences from work. Both women also suspected that he was using illicit substances. However, police found no evidence to prove his involvement in the murder and eventually cleared him as a suspect. The detectives also investigated the maintenance company employees who had access to the house where Tara lived. They had a spare key, which might explain why there was no sign of forced entry. Unfortunately, this lead also yielded no results. Since then, the case has had no new clues. The police continue to search for new suspects and witnesses, but they are keeping many details about their investigation under wraps to avoid it being undermined. The investigation into Tara's murder continued over the years, with several new leads emerging, but it did not yield any results for the investigation. One witness reported seeing an African-American man near Tara's house on the day of the fire, while another claimed to have seen blood on a classmate's notebook shortly after the murder. Despite police efforts to pursue these leads, they ultimately led to dead ends. Tara's parents offered a $77,000 reward in hopes of generating new leads. The detective team working on the case changed several times, but they all encountered considerable difficulties due to lack of evidence. The fire in Tara's room burned most of the evidence, leaving the police with few clues to investigate. 19 years after Tara's murder, a podcast about her case was released, generating renewed interest and attention. The podcast gathered information from Tara's family and individuals connected to the case, re-examining the evidence and helped reinvestigate the case. The police department took notice of the podcast, leading to better cooperation between detectives and Tara's family. For several months, detectives reviewed all available information and evidence, using modern DNA analysis tools to re-examine the evidence. Their efforts paid off on May 13, 2024, when police announced that they had finally arrested the perpetrator, 23 years after the murder. The suspect, Edric Lamont Faust, 48, was arrested, but police did not reveal how they identified the suspect, citing the need to keep some information secret to protect ongoing legal proceedings. Investigators only mentioned that modern DNA analysis tools and other biological evidence played a crucial role in Edric's identification. Further details of the case were not disclosed at the press conference, and police chose to withhold evidence to avoid compromising Edric's trial. However, his arrest documents revealed that he was accused of assaulting Tara. Additionally, a piece of skin was found under Tara's fingernails, which was used to extract the killer's DNA using modern DNA analysis tools. The police had likely known about Edric for years due to his long history of crime, which included multiple arrests. At the time of Tara's murder, he was 25 and lived in the same city as she. Despite this, the police initially found no evidence suggesting that Edric knew Tara. It wasn't until recently, thanks to advanced DNA analysis, that Edric became a suspect in the case. Detectives only started investigating him a few days before his arrest. Edric is currently in jail awaiting trial. The police are confident that they have found the right person, as they obtained irrefutable DNA evidence. As a result, Edric was denied bail, and Tara's case is now considered closed. Tara's family finally finds out the truth after 23 years. Thanks to a new team of detectives who reopen the case and solve it. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sandra Miles. Sandra was born on May 26, 1949, in the small, cozy town of Harn, Kansas, USA. She had a close relationship with her sister. They attended the same school, walked together, and spent time with their family. After graduating from high school, Sandra focused on starting a family. She was in a serious relationship with her boyfriend, and they decided to get married. They welcomed a son named Chad. Unfortunately, the marriage did not work out. Sandra quickly realized that her husband was not the right match for her. After the divorce, Sandra found another partner, but that relationship also ended in disappointment, leading her to break up with him as well. In 1976, Sandra, a single mother, got a job at a factory that made pumps and pistons for industrial machinery. This job required her family to relocate to a larger city, Hutchinson. In her new position, Sandra proved herself and gained the respect of management through her hard work and responsibility. She performed her tasks exceptionally well. It was during this time that she met her third husband, Jerry Miles. They were instantly attracted to each other, and their friendship quickly blossomed into romance, leading to their decision to marry. Their marriage happened rapidly, but it was evident that Jerry and Sandra truly loved each other and were eager to get married. A year later, Sandra was expecting a baby with her new husband. In September of that year, they welcomed their daughter, Tracy, who brought immense joy to her parents, especially Sandra, who had always dreamed of having a large family. During this time, their marriage appeared to be perfect. The couple had a strong bond and prioritized their family above all else. Jerry's children regularly communicated with him and participated in family events. He particularly enjoyed spending time with Tracy at the nearby lake. To outsiders, their marriage appeared perfect. However, only close friends and family knew of the underlying issue. After 7 years of marriage, Sandra could no longer endure her husband's alcoholism. This revelation shocked many, as she had previously concealed the problem. Sandra ultimately chose to end her marriage to her third husband, Jerry, and raise their children by herself. She thought Jerry was a kind man when he was sober, but he had difficulty managing his drinking. When he drank, he became a completely different person. At first, he was able to control his drinking, but over time, his alcoholism became more and more evident. His relapses became more frequent, placing a heavy burden on Sandra. She worked every day at the factory to support the family and eventually became exhausted from the thing. Sandra always saw Jerry as a wonderful husband and father. Their relationship ended because he struggled with alcohol addiction. Even so, she continued to support their children while maintaining her job. This was a challenging time for her, but she was determined not to give up and managed to handle the difficulties well. Jerry offered some help, but when he succumbed to alcohol again, Sandra had to face all the challenges alone. Despite this, she stayed confident in her abilities and was driven to ensure her children had a bright future and everything they needed for a fulfilling life. It was certainly challenging, but Sandra Miles was not one to give up easily. She remained a conscientious mother, spending all her free time with her children. Despite facing difficulties, she handled them with grace, which brought her closer to her daughter Tracy during this time. Her son had grown up, moved out, and started his own life, but Tracy continues to support her mother because she realizes that Sandra's efforts are mainly to benefit her. In the spring of 1997, Sandra's relationship with Tracy, her 16-year-old daughter, began to deteriorate. Tracy has started dating her first boyfriend and is going through the rebellious phase that is common in adolescence. Sandra tried to improve their relationship. She thought her daughter's problems were only temporary. At the same time, Sandra was mindful of her own past failed marriages and felt the need to caution Tracy about the mistakes she made in her youth. Tracy's affection for her mother faded quickly, leading to a strained relationship between them. To win her daughter's love, Sandra bought Tracy a Black Moon car, which Tracy had longed for. This gift excited Tracy. She adored her car and made a point to arrive first at school every day so everyone would notice it. It seemed like Tracy had a bright future ahead, and she represented hope for Sandra. Sandra was determined to do whatever it took to help her daughter succeed. However, fate can be cruel. On March 20th, Sandra's son Chad and his girlfriend Mindy visited her with exciting news. Mindy was pregnant. Sandra was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother and eagerly anticipated the birth of her grandson. Unfortunately, Sandra would not live to see that moment. While Sandra's sister, Pat Douglas Butler, was having breakfast with her husband, she received an urgent call from Sandra's workplace. Sandra's employer reported that Sandra had been absent for 5 days. Concerned for her well-being, the boss tried to contact her but was unable to reach her. Pat also hadn't heard from her during this time, as they didn't typically call each other every day. Worried, Pat and her husband decided to visit Sandra's house to check if she was okay or if she needed help. When Pat and her husband arrived, they found the door locked and the house appeared deserted. This was strange because Sandra lived there with her daughter, Tracy, who was usually very active and should have been home at that time. Then, Pat and her husband went to the school to look for Tracy. The teachers were confused as Tracy had also been absent for several days. The class teacher, Noni, tried to call the family, but no one answered. Alarmed by the situation, Pat decided to call the police to report the disappearance of both Sandra and Tracy. The officers took Pat's statement and assessed the situation. When they arrived, Pat was waiting for them and handed over a spare key to the front door that she had kept. Law enforcement officers entered the house and immediately detected a strong, unpleasant smell of decomposition, unmistakable in nature. The experienced patrol officers recognized the importance of preserving the crime scene to protect the evidence, so they called for backup. When additional police officers arrived, they discovered the decomposed body of a woman lying on her bed, covered with a blanket. Upon removing the blanket, they found a power cord from a household appliance wrapped around her neck, indicating she likely died from strangulation. Additionally, there were multiple injuries visible on her face and head. Due to the severe level of decomposition, the victim's identity could not be immediately determined. It was unclear how many blows she had suffered or what exactly was hit with, but it was clear that her death was not natural, it was a murder. A forensic medical examination was needed to understand the details surrounding her death. However, dental records confirmed that the body belonged to Sandra Miles. Besides, they could not find Tracy in the house, indicating that she was missing. At first, detectives thought Tracy might also be a victim of the same attacker. They searched the house thoroughly, but found no evidence suggesting she had been harmed like her mother. It was possible that Tracy had been kidnapped, placing her in great danger and requiring immediate action. She was added to the missing persons list, and the search for her began. It was unclear who would wish harm on Sandra, a woman who devoted her life to creating a future for her children. When Detective Hutchinson began investigating the case, they considered every possibility, including neighbors and her ex-husband. The aim was to uncover who had a motive for the murder of 48-year-old Sandra Miles and the disappearance of Tracy. Sandra's family, sister, son, and ex-husband were quickly informed of the tragic news. All were in shock. Sandra seemed to have no enemies and was known as a kind and gentle person who worked hard to overcome life's difficulty and support her daughter. It was hard to believe anyone could be so cruel to someone defenseless. Tracy's brother, Chad, made an appeal through the newspaper, asking locals to help find Tracy, his only surviving family member who had been taken from him. Forensic experts have revealed harrowing details of Sandra's last moments. Sandra had been knocked to the ground by repeated blows to her head with a blunt object. While she was incapacitated, a power cord was used to strangle her. The presence of large bruises and internal bleeding indicated she endured a prolonged and violent assault. The medical examiner believed there were likely at least 2 attackers. Investigators suggested that the incident was a robbery gone wrong, possibly triggered when Sandra confronted the intruders as they attempted to steal from her home. Sandra might have seen them, then a fight broke out, and they murdered her because they were afraid she would report to the police. However, after inspecting the crime scene, detectives found this scenario unlikely. There were no signs of a break-in, and the house lost nothing, except Tracy's favorite car. It didn't make sense to commit murder for the sake of theft. The brutality of Sandra's injuries was notable. An ordinary robber wouldn't have wasted time with strangulation, they would have shot her to avoid confrontation. The severe damage to her upper body indicated that the injuries were not a result of panic from being caught, but rather a deliberate attack meant to kill. This level of cruelty suggested a culmination of a long-standing feud. Another possibility considered was that of a maniacal attacker, but generally, such individuals act alone. This crime, however, was clearly carried out by multiple people given the severity of the injuries. Now, the killers had taken Tracy captive, making it urgent to locate the criminals. The detectives believed that Sandra had willingly let her attackers into the house, as there were no signs of forced entry. Therefore, they recognized the need to continue the investigation. The police contacted all of Sandra's relatives, friends, neighbors, and co-workers as part of their investigation. The police focused particularly on her ex-husbands, as they might have motives rooted in resentment. Sandra's third husband, Jerry, who struggled with alcoholism, drew significant attention. He may have been unhappy after the divorce, and the detective speculated that he could have confronted Sandra while intoxicated, possibly leading to her death. However, the detectives to find that he had an alibi, so he was removed from the list of suspects. Police interviewed all of Sandra's acquaintances to identify suspects in the violent massacre and possibly Tracy's kidnapping. Sandra's sister, Pat, informed detectives that she last saw Sandra alive 5 days earlier. On that day, she received a work call around the same time Tracy visited the school where she studied, making it a key date in the investigation. Efforts to gather information from friends and acquaintances were unproductive. So detectives turned to the neighbors. They discovered that the neighborhood was peaceful and close-knit, where everyone was familiar with one another. The next day, news of the incident at Sandra's house spread quickly. A crowd gathered in the yard and driveway, prompting the police to restrict access to the area. Many neighbors stopped by out of curiosity, anxious to learn what had happened. There was a growing concern in everyone, as they realized a dangerous killer, and possibly a kidnapper, was still at large, especially since there had been no word from Tracy. Fortunately, some witnesses in the crowd provided valuable information to the detectives. A neighbor who lived directly across the street reported seeing Tracy about 5 days earlier, on March 25th. He had noticed her with 2 young men. They all got into one of the guy's cars and drove away, and he never saw them again. This account raised questions about the nature of Tracy's disappearance, as it didn't fit the typical scenario of a schoolgirl being kidnapped. The friends, identified as Mark and Jay, lived nearby, so the detectives decided to interview them at their homes. Mark quickly left as several police officers spotted a red car in the distance. When Mark noticed the police approaching, he sped away and vanished at high speed. This behavior seemed suspicious, so one of the detectives alerted the patrol nearby about his direction. Mark wouldn't have fled so rapidly if he weren't trying to hide something from the police. Luckily, it didn't take long for them to catch up. Mark was eventually stopped just a few kilometers from his home. Mark was driving his car with a friend who was anxious about the recent tragedy at Sandra's house. The 2 young men attempted to convince the police that their fear was the only reason for their unusual behavior, but seasoned detectives sensed they were hiding something. Consequently, both were taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, the young men insisted they were merely frightened by the news of the incident at the Miles residence. Their stories closely matched, but the police found no solid evidence against them, so they were released. However, they became important witnesses because the police were aware that Tracy had recently been in a relationship with a young man named Jeremy Bell. They also knew that Sandra disapproved of him, believing he would have a negative impact on her daughter's life. Eventually, Tracy broke up with Jeremy and started dating Paul Nelson. Several witnesses stated that shortly before the tragedy, Tracy had a significant argument with her mother over Jeremy and Paul, both of whom Sandra disapproved. Detectives began interviewing numerous teenagers connected to this group. It was established that Tracy's ex, Jeremy, had a volatile temperament and had even made threats against Paul. However, Paul was not the main reason for Tracy and Jeremy's breakup. That was largely due to Sandra's disapproval, which may have prompted Jeremy's hostility toward her. In fact, the relationship between Sandra and Jeremy was extremely strained. Sandra had to go to the police station to obtain a restraining order against Jeremy. He accused her of ruining his relationship with her daughter, Tracy, and threatened her, although he never acted on these threats. During drunken parties, he often expressed how much Sandra bothered him to his friends. Sandra was determined to protect her daughter from him, which only led to more conflicts. It was known that Jeremy was already on the police's radar due to his numerous violations, and the restraining order worsened the situation. He clearly held a grudge against Sandra, which raised concerns that he could have kidnapped Tracy. At this point, detectives believed that Jeremy had killed Sandra and was now holding Tracy captive. They decided to question Jeremy, who, along with his friend William Lennon, had been arrested for burglary on the 1st of the month, just a few days before Sandra's murder. Since Jeremy was in prison during the time of the murder, he could not have been involved in Sandra's death. The fate of Tracy remained uncertain. The kidnapper had not made any demands, leading the police to fear that she might already be dead, although there was still a chance she was being held hostage. Time was of the essence for her safety. When investigators spoke with Jeremy in prison, he explained that he was not in a relationship with Tracy at the time of Sandra's murder due to a restraining order that required him to avoid contact with her. As a result, they broke up. During this time, Tracy began dating another man, Paul Nelson, which led Jeremy to distance himself from her. The police noticed that Jeremy appeared to strongly dislike Paul and openly expressed a desire to confront. Jeremy accused Paul of encouraging Tracy to engage in criminal behavior and worried that she might become involved with drugs because of her relationship with him. However, he stated that he did not harbor any ill feelings toward Sandra. In fact, their communication improved once Tracy started dating Paul. As Sandra shifted her anger towards Paul, Jeremy supported Sandra during this time. On March 25th, just before Sandra's murder, Jeremy warned Tracy about her new boyfriend, Paul, whom he considered dangerous. By that time, the autopsy results were complete. The medical examiner determined that Sandra died on March 26 from 4 stab wounds and significant blunt force trauma to the head. These injuries were confirmed as the cause of death, and strangulation was also used to ensure she was dead. The police needed to locate Paul Nelson, the main suspect, to question him. However, he was missing. His parents reported that he hadn't been seen since March 26. Like Tracy, detectives believed he was involved in Sandra's murder. They needed to find him and uncover what happened to Tracy, but they could only address that after detaining him. Investigators discovered that Paul had been in regular contact with his friend Zwickle, with whom he had lived before going into hiding. When detectives spoke with Zwickle, he provided valuable information. He confirmed that Sandra did not approve of the relationship between Tracy and Paul. Sandra believed that Paul, Tracy's new boyfriend, was a bad influence and was trying to get her involved with drugs. Despite Sandra's objections, Tracy and Paul continued to meet secretly. After several weeks, Sandra found out about it and was upset. She told her daughter that getting involved with a drug addict was a big mistake. Despite this, she refused to face the truth. Her mother urged her to end the relationship with Paul. Sandra then informed Tracy that if she wanted a family and children, she would need to move in with Paul. This news surprised both Tracy and Paul, as they had nowhere to live. Sandra advised Tracy to think about ending her pregnancy, and Tracy consented. However, their relationship worsened after the abortion. A shocking moment for Tracy was when Sandra threatened to take her car keys if she didn't end her relationship with Paul. This tension may have led Paul to develop a grudge against Sandra, who he and Tracy saw as an obstacle to their relationship. Paul's friend, Zwickle, reported that on March 26, Paul returned home around 10 a.m. and immediately began packing his belongings. Paul mentioned that he was planning to leave with Tracy and that they had $2,000, which he believed would be sufficient for their escape. Paul confided in Zwickle that he and Tracy intended to run away in her car, and Zwickle assumed they were fleeing due to a disagreement. However, Paul did not mention Sandra's death to Zwickle. When Zwickle inquired about how Paul obtained the money, he claimed he had sold Sandra's tape recorder to a pawn shop. It was later discovered that tape recorder had indeed gone missing from the house after the attack. In reality, Paul was not being truthful. Selling tape recorder only netted him less than $50. It remained unclear how Paul could have acquired such a significant amount of money at that time. Afterwards, Zwickle noticed how Paul and Tracy got into a car and drove away without any signs of stress. It seemed they were heading to Mexico. Given the situation, Zwickle began to suspect that Paul might be involved in a murder. As a result, Paul and Tracy were placed on a nationwide wanted list. Investigators in Kansas identified 18-year-old Paul Nelson as the prime suspect. The police were particularly troubled by the $2,000 Paul had, which he used to flee. They wondered if he had robbed someone or committed another crime. Investigators were shocked and they examined Sandra's bank accounts. On March 26, her daughter, Tracy, withdrew money from her mother's account. While looking into this, detectives discovered that Tracy had gone to the bank with Paul and cashed a check with the teller. Tracy claimed that her mother had given her the money to buy a new car. This raised serious suspicions about her actions. A bank employee reported that Tracy and Paul were calm during the transaction and showed no signs of worry. Amid suspicions that Tracy may have been a hostage in a kidnapping, police now have new suspicions. It seemed Paul's friend, Zwickle, was telling the truth. Could Tracy actually be a willing participant in the crime instead of a hostage? To investigate further, they reached out to Tracy's best friend, Candace Keno. Candace revealed that on March 25th, Tracy had called her to share that a serious conflict had erupted with her mother. Tracy's mother had taken the car key away from her and threatened to kick her out. This created evident hostility between them. Candace mentioned that following this incident, Tracy decided to run away with Paul and admitted this during their phone conversation. The officers' doubts were confirmed. It became clear that from the very beginning, no one had actually tried to keep Tracy as a hostage. The police confirmed that Tracy and Paul had crossed the border into Mexico and subsequently got lost. After some time, a United States Border Service officer informed the police that Tracy and Paul had re-entered the U.S. near El Paso. The reason for their return was unclear, but it was evident that they were in trouble. Efforts to locate the couple intensified. On April 8, Candace contacted investigators to report that she had spoken with Tracy on the phone. Candace provided the police with Tracy's phone number. Tracy and Paul was located on the outskirts of El Paso, and later, that day, investigators apprehended Paul. Candace agreed to make another call to help detectives pinpoint the location from which Tracy had called. Tracy and Paul was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. Paul did not appear to be a dangerous gangster. He kept his eyes on the floor and trembled with fear. He explained the details of the attack, admitting that on the evening of the 25th, he had gone to the house Sandra's. Then, Tracy and Paul had devised an escape plan, and it was Tracy who proposed drastic measures. She wanted to kill her mother to prevent her from ever finding her. The next morning, Candace stopped by to pick up Tracy, and they left for school together. Meanwhile, Paul was hiding in the bedroom with a tree branch he intended to use as a weapon. He claimed he found it in the house and did not plan to kill Sandra. He only wanted to strike her so she would lose consciousness. However, the police were skeptical of his explanation. They questioned why he would sneak into the house and attack her if he didn't intend to kill her, knowing she could eventually regain consciousness and report him. It seemed clear to the investigators that his intention was murder, which would allow him to escape without being caught. Paul continued his story. He claimed that Sandra surprised him by opening the door and immediately began yelling and insulting him. In a fit of anger, he wrapped a cord around Sandra's neck and strangled her until she stopped breathing. Afterward, he covered she with a blanket and fled the scene. Meanwhile, Tracy, smiling, testified in the next room. Their accounts were similar, except for how much blame they placed on each other. Tracy asserted that she did not act alone. She claimed that she and Paul planned the murder together, but only Paul killed her mother. Tracy insisted that she had no role in the crime. She also revealed that the wooden figurine used in the murder was hidden in the backyard. The police later found the figurine there, along with Sandra's blood on it. The prosecutor's office was prepared to charge Tracy and Paul with first-degree murder. According to state law, the maximum penalty for this crime was life imprisonment. Paul's defense argued that he acted under Tracy's influence, claiming he should be guilty of manslaughter instead. Conversely, Tracy's lawyer argued that Paul was the instigator, as he was the one who strangled Sandra, while Tracy played a secondary role. The trial began on February 26, 1999, with both defense teams trying to downplay their clients' involvement in the horrific crime to lessen their possible sentences. During the trial, the young defendants, Tracy and Paul, displayed disrespectful behavior and laughed provocatively. Tracy refused to meet with her family, even though they wanted to discuss her involvement in Sandra's murder. Her brother, Chad, particularly wished to speak with her. On April 22, 1999, the court sentenced Tracy Miles and Paul Nelson to life in prison, with a minimum of 25 years before they can apply for parole. After the judge announced the sentence, Paul made an obscene gesture. Both Tracy and Paul expressed dissatisfaction with the verdict and showed no signs of remorse for their actions. In the future, Tracy and Paul will have the chance to request early release, but Sandra's relatives hope that this does not occur. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rola Pispiragou. Rola Pispiragou was born in 1989 in Patras, Greece. She had a younger sister named Dimitra, who was 8 years her junior. The sisters primarily grew up with their grandparents. Rola was known for her spirited personality and was often described as a mischievous girl. She pursued a medical education to become a nurse, but never worked in that field. Throughout her life, she tried various professions, but her true passion was football. While working as a football referee, Rola met her future husband, Manos Daskalaki, who was a goalkeeper at the time. Rola, 22 years old, was deeply in love with 19-year-old Manos. They began dating, and soon after, Rola became pregnant, and they to decide to marry. Manos's parents opposed their relationship, feeling embarrassed by Rola's unusual behavior and the fact that she was 3 years older than him. However, this did not stop Manos. They got married in 2012. And soon after, their daughter Georgina was born. Like her mother, Georgina also developed a love for football, and Rola took her to training sessions. In 2015, Melina, Manos and Rola's second daughter, was born. Although on the surface they looked like a happy family with 2 children, in reality, many problems still existed within. They frequently argued, and Rola struggled with depression, having attempted to end her life twice without success. A tragedy struck on April 13, 2019, when their 3.5-year-old daughter Melina died. She had been hospitalized with symptoms of a rare form of leukemia, which doctors assured them was fully treatable. Melina has overcome the disease, she was set to return home, everything seemed fine. On that fateful day, Rola was at the hospital with Melina. The little girl was in a cheerful mood, enjoying shashlik that her parents had brought. However, everything changed abruptly after her father, Manos, stepped out of the room. According to Rola, they settled down for a nap shortly after he left. About an hour later, a nurse came in to administer medication, and just 10 minutes after that, at 4:40 p.m., Melina began trembling, wheezing, and have a seizure. Rola cried out for her daughter, but when that didn't help, she ran to summon the nurses. They rushed to assist Melina, but it was too late. A forensic expert later determined that the cause of death was liver failure and pulmonary edema. The family was deeply affected by their grief. Manos and Rola are back together, and their marriage grew stronger. In 2021, they welcomed their third child, Irita, and they felt happy again, believing that nothing could disrupt their joy. Tragically, just 6 months later, the baby passed away. She passed away in her sleep at their home in March 2021, while sharing a room with her mother, Rola. According to the forensic examination, she died of sinus node aplasia and heart cell degeneration, leading to cardiac arrest. This disease usually occurs in the elderly and is rarely seen in children. However, doctors believe that this is a congenital disease. On that tragic night, Rola's sister Dimitra was not staying over, leaving Rolla alone with the baby. Around 7:30 a.m., Irita woke up, and Rolla gave her a pacifier before they both tried to go back to sleep. When they checked on Irita at 11 a.m., she was unresponsive. In a panic, Rolla called Manos for help and attempted to perform CPR. After several unsuccessful tries, she decided to call an ambulance. An hour later, the paramedics arrived and confirmed Irita's death. Her body had already begun to cool and stiffen. The loss of her second child, Irita, raised many questions about Rolla's actions. Why did she not call an ambulance right away, instead of trying to resuscitate her child and contacting Manos? Valuable time was lost, and there were concerns that Irita might have been saved. Rolla explained that she was in shock, and an hour later, she realized she needed to call an ambulance. The family was left with one child, their eldest daughter Georgina. Before Irita's death, the relationship between Manos and Rolla was already strained, and the loss only increased the emotional distance between them. Their problems are getting more and more stressful, and divorce seemed imminent. Georgina also suffered from many health problems. Just 15 days after Irita's passing, she was hospitalized due to convulsions. The medical team tried their best to resuscitate her, and thanks to their efforts, she survived. However, she was diagnosed with heart failure, which led to the implantation of a defibrillator and a pacemaker. Following this, she was closely monitored by doctors and had to be re-hospitalized multiple times for encephalopathy, the cause of which remained unknown. She experienced seizures, and despite thorough examinations, the reasons for them could not be identified. The doctors decided to transfer her to a different clinic for further evaluation. Tragically, on January 29, 2022, 9-year-old Georgina passed away. This news shocked everyone, especially since she had seemed healthy. As doctors were trying to save the girl, her mother, Rolla, suddenly declared her dead. She asked them to stop, saying that it was pointless and that she would not come back to life. She also said that Georgina had endured a lot of pain and suggested that it would be better for them to let her rest in peace. Rolla's calm demeanor during this moment surprised the medical staff. A few hours after Georgina's passing, Rolla shared a post on social media expressing her feelings. She stated that she had given life to Georgina but was upset that Georgina had left her. Rolla highlighted that Georgina brought her joy and was a source of strength in her life. In her farewell message to her daughter, she wished Georgina to enjoy her reunion with her sisters. Rolla also expressed that, in her heart, Georgina would always be with her, and she affirmed her love for all three of her children. In memory of her children, Rolla got tattoos. She got her first tattoo after Georgina was born, and the others were done after the deaths of her two daughters, Melina and Irita. The circumstances surrounding the deaths of her three daughters raised suspicions. They all died within 3 years, one after the other. In each case, their health conditions appeared to be stable, and doctors were initially optimistic about their recovery. However, doctors were shocked by the sad outcome. This caused many doubts and speculations. Some people believed the Paspirigo family was cursed and that these deaths were the result of supernatural forces. Doctors were skeptical of Rolla's explanation for her daughter's death and contacted law enforcement to investigate. The focus was on the eldest daughter, Georgina, as they had her medical records and her body for further examination. Investigators interviewed 20 doctors from 5 hospitals in Athens and Patras who had treated Georgina. A discrepancy arose between what the doctors reported and what Rolla claimed. Initially, doctors suspected Georgina had heart problems. But later tests revealed little girl did not have any heart issues. Rolla frequently reported seizures and neurological issues, but examinations did not show any evidence of these conditions. Instead, Georgina was diagnosed with gastroenteritis and psychological issues stemming from the deaths of her two younger sisters, and little girl was discharged. However, little girl was readmitted due to seizures, and her condition remained unclear. Plans were made to transfer her to a hospital with better monitoring capabilities, but unfortunately, she died before that could happen, despite appearing healthy at the time. Before her death, Georgina told doctors she felt as if there was a bomb in her stomach about to explode. She was concerned and tried to understand the deaths of her younger sisters, Melina and Irita, fearing something similar might happen to her. She shared her concerns with the doctors at the hospital. Manos and Rolla initially denied any involvement in the children's deaths. They did some interviews and finally cleared the doubts about them. They spoke of the traumatic experience they faced, often using the word suddenly to stress that their children died unexpectedly and without warning, even though there were no signs that anything bad was imminent. According to Rolla, Georgina had difficulty breathing. However, toxicology tests revealed no issues. The doctor confirmed that Georgina had no heart problems and mentioned her sudden death. However, the investigation is still ongoing. It was discovered that Rolla was present with her three children at all three incidents, but she asserted that this said nothing. Rolla declares that she is the children's mother, and that she has always been there for them. She didn't understand why that surprised everyone and told them to stop talking nonsense. Manos blamed the doctors and was confused because all tests showed the children's was healthy before his sudden death. He believed the treatment may have been wrong. Although toxicological tests performed after the girls' deaths yielded no findings. They were only conducted for the most common substances. So it was decided to do more extensive testing that would not normally be done. In the case involving Irita's death, Rolla called an ambulance too late. Similarly, in the case with Melina, Rolla delayed seeking help and only contacted the nurses 35 minutes after Melina had died, by which point her body had started to cool. Why did it take Rolla so long to ask for help? A forensic expert observed small scratches on Melina's nose, indicating that there might have been a struggle. In addition, tests showed that the concentration of ketamine in Georgina's body was very high, 6 times the normal amount used for anesthesia. Ketamine is not available at regular pharmacies and is hard to obtain, indicating that it could not have entered her system by accident. The drug was injected into Georgina's body just 20 minutes before her death. The question arises, who could have administered the ketamine if the doctors did not? The medical staff had last checked on her shortly before she died. And since Rolla was the only person present in the hospital room when little girl passed away, Rolla became a suspect in the murder. Later, the bodies of the two other girls, Melina and Irita, were exhumed. While no ketamine was found, but experts concluded that both Melina and Irita died of suffocation, and their deaths were classified as murder. A bloody handkerchief was discovered next to the baby's body. This handkerchief had been taken from the house. Rolla had requested its return but was denied. On March 30, 2022, police arrested 33-year-old Rolla Paspirigu at her younger sister's house in Patras. Rolla had a medical degree and was capable of obtaining the drug. She knows her actions well and does them consciously. Investigators established that several years ago, she attended seminars related to criminology. Rolla's younger sister, Dimitra, refused to believe that Rolla could be responsible for the children's deaths. She stated that she did not believe Rolla would have harmed her daughters and that if they did not die of natural causes, then someone else was to blame and should be punished. Dimitra confirmed that she did not see anything unusual while in the house during the time of Irita's death. However, others described Rolla as cold and emotionless, suggesting she could potentially be responsible for the tragedy. During the investigation of Georgina's notebook, a piece of paper was discovered that said, "Her mother, Rolla, is very evil." Neighbors reported witnessing Rolla physically abuse Georgina when little girl was just a baby. They informed the police, and the complaint was forwarded to social services, which monitored the family by making regular visits to their home. A message was found on Rolla's phone that she sent the day before Georgina's death, stating, "See what happens tomorrow." This message became a crucial piece of evidence against her. After Rolla's arrest, her husband, Manos, learned about the evidence and became convinced of her guilt, leading him to file for divorce. He was shocked by her actions and don't understand what her motive is. Manos mentioned that she was pregnant at the time of Georgina's death, but he suspected the child was not his since they had not been intimate for a long time. Following Georgina's death, Rolla quickly ended her pregnancy. Manos believed she might have been seeing another man to provoke jealousy, and he also questioned whether their middle daughter, Melina, and youngest daughter, Irita, were his biological children. When Rolla learned about the divorce, she became very angry. She sent a message to her friend, expressing her desire to cast a spell on her husband, Manos, to prevent him from leaving her. 2 weeks before Georgina's death, Manos proposed a divorce, prompting she to consult fortune tellers in hopes of keeping he. Unfortunately, this did not help. So what could Rolla's motives be? Initially, there was speculation that she might have Munchausen syndrome. This is a condition in which caregivers intentionally harm or create health problems for the person they care for, in order to gain attention or sympathy. However, this theory was later dismissed. It was then revealed that Manos had a mistress. Rolla was aware of the infidelity and was contemplating divorce herself. She desperately attempted to hold on to her husband, possibly seeking to regain his attention and rebuild the family. Rolla's younger sister, Dimitra, does not accept this hypothesis. She asserts that she advised Rolla to divorce Manos due to issues in their marriage. Although Rolla understood the problems, she hesitated to divorce for the sake of their children. Dimitra found it hard to believe that Rolla could be capable of such actions. A psychiatrist who evaluated Rolla concluded that her thoughts were entirely centered on her husband. She was obsessed with him, exhibiting intense jealousy towards other women. After Rolla was arrested, about 500 people gathered outside her home, expressing outrage and demanding the death penalty for killing her 3 children. At that time, her mother, younger sister, and other relatives were inside the home. The trial in this case is still in progress. Rolla is currently in custody, housed in a solitary VIP cell that includes various amenities. She does not interact with other inmates, and for her safety, she is under constant surveillance due to concerns that she may attempt to end her life. Rolla is charged with the murder of 3 children, but she continues to deny all allegations. She insists that she is a victim who has lost children and freedom. She believes this is a misunderstanding and is confident that she will be acquitted, released from prison, and able to repair her relationship with Manos. She has not yet accepted the reality of her divorce. Rolla's ex-husband, Manos, wants nothing to do with her. He is in a new relationship, planning a wedding, and hoping to have children. On March 29, 2024, Rolla Pispiragou was sentenced to life in prison by a jury in Athens. The jury unanimously found her guilty of the murder of her eldest daughter, Georgina. The court agreed with the prosecutor's recommendation for the sentence. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Greenberg was born in New York on June 23, 1993, as the only child of Joshua and Sandy Greenberg. At the time of the events, she was 27 years old and living in Philadelphia. Ellen grew up in a family filled with love and was a cheerful, outgoing girl. In high school, she played softball and golf, excelling as a competitive athlete. She was well-liked and had many friends. Her mother said that she was a special person, able to connect people with each other. After graduating from college, Ellen earned a degree in communications from the University of Pennsylvania. Even so, she felt this was not her true passion. As a result, she took evening classes at the university and eventually earned a teaching degree. After completing her studies, she quickly found a job as a first-grade teacher in Philadelphia. In 2008, Ellen met Samuel Goldberg, the son of a famous family in the area. They started dating soon after. Deeply in love, they soon decided to live together. By 2011, they were engaged and planning to marry in August. Ellen was thrilled and joyfully prepared for the wedding, trying on her dress and sending out invitations. She had no idea that incident would soon take a strange and unexpected turn. On January 26, 2011, while Ellen was at work, Philadelphia had a major snowstorm, prompting the school to close early. Ellen returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé, Samuel. At around 5 p.m., Samuel went to the gym, he unaware it would be the last time he saw Ellen alive. When he returned at 5:45 p.m., he found the apartment door locked from the inside. He knocked repeatedly, called Ellen's name, phoned her multiple times, and sent 9 text messages, but received no response. Then, he asked the security guard for help to break down the door, but the guard refused, citing rules against leaving post. Determined, he broke down the door himself. Inside, he discovered a horrific scene. Ellen was sitting on the kitchen floor, leaning against the cabinets, with multiple wounds. He immediately called 911. The operator instructed him to check if Ellen was breathing and to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. However, he noticed a knife stuck in her chest, preventing him from starting resuscitation. Tragically, Ellen had already passed away. When the police arrived to inspect the scene, they found that the apartment's entrance had not been forced, and inside, everything appeared to be in order, with no signs of a struggle. The door was locked from the inside, and the latch was secured in the usual way until Samuel broke it down, making it unlikely that an intruder had entered. The police also observed that Ellen's hands had no defensive wounds. Despite her multiple injuries, it seemed improbable that she had inflicted them on herself. Nevertheless, waiting for the forensic examination results, the police concluded that Ellen had ended her life, even though there was no note explaining her actions. Additionally, there were fruits on the kitchen table, indicating that Ellen might have been planning to make a fruit salad when she supposedly decided to end her life. The police took Samuel to the station to provide testimony. By this time, Ellen's parents had received the sad news over the phone. They lived in Harrisburg, a 2-hour drive away. When they learned that their only daughter had passed away, they completely collapsed. The very next day, information about Ellen's death has changed. The autopsy revealed she had 20 wounds, 10 on the front and 10 on the neck from the back. Medical examiners emphasized that these injuries showed that this was a murder. She also had bruises on various parts of her body, both recent and older, making it hard to believe she could inflict neck and head wounds on herself from behind. Especially because at least 2 of these wounds were almost fatal and left her unconscious. Additionally, it takes a great deal of force to cause these injuries, especially head injuries. She was found with a knife stuck in her chest after already sustaining 19 injuries. Could she have done all of this by herself? Despite the evidence that has been found, the police disagreed with autopsy officers' conclusion. Authorities announced that Ellen ended her life. They came to this conclusion because they found no signs of anyone else being there. The door was locked from the inside and the neighbors heard no strange sounds, only Samuel's screams. Additionally, DNA analysis of the knife revealed only Ellen's fingerprints. The bruises on her were explained by the police as injuries from playing sports, even though she had not participated in any sports for several years. Doctors also checked Ellen's mental health and learned from her parents that recently, she has been dealing with anxiety. She had been prescribed 2 medications, both known to have side effects that may cause negative thoughts or behaviors. However, her psychiatrist, Len, stated that she showed no signs of end-her-life thoughts. 2 weeks before the incident, when they met, she seemed fine. In addition, the psychiatrist said had never heard Ellen say that anyone had treated her cruelly. Her family also confirmed this. They described Ellen as a good-natured and cheerful. Her loved ones couldn't believe she would harm herself, as she was happy, preparing for her upcoming wedding, and had even tried on her dress and sent out invitations just days before the incident. Ellen's mother and friends admit that she has been feeling anxious and stressed due to work and wedding preparations. However, they consider this to be normal. The thought that she would harm herself just before her wedding was completely out of character. There was a conflict between the forensic medical examination, which ruled it as murder, and the police, who believed Ellen harmed herself. To resolve this, the doctor decided to send a sample from Ellen's spine to a neurologist at the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau. This was to verify the cause of death. Because if one of her severe neck wounds had penetrated deep enough to reach the spinal cord, causing paralysis, she wouldn't have been able to inflict further wounds. This indicated that someone else was responsible for Ellen's death. 3 months after the incident, the medical examiner retracted his murder hypothesis, suggesting instead that Ellen's neck wounds were not severe enough to cause paralysis and that she could have inflicted them on herself. Ellen's parents were not given a clear explanation for this change in the investigation's direction. They described Ellen as squeamish, noting that she avoided even piercing her ears a second time due to her low pain tolerance, making it hard for them to believe she could harm herself. Despite this, the authorities closed the case. Refusing to accept this decision, Ellen's family decided to pursue their own investigation. They hired top experts, including forensic specialists Kirill Klin and Henry Lee, to consider the evidence and the autopsy report. These experts cast doubt on the police investigation report that Ellen did this to herself. In 2012, Henry noted that the likelihood of murder Ellen is significant. Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht pointed out that statistically, women rarely use sharp objects to end her life and seldom harm themselves through clothing. On the other hand, Bren, a seasoned detective, investigated Ellen's death. After reviewing the footage, Bren claimed to notice that the bloodstains did not match the position in which Ellen was found, as she was sitting and leaning against the kitchen cabinets. However, there was a trail of blood running horizontally from her nose to her ear, and the blood splatter on her shoes indicated that she was standing when she suffered the injuries. All of this led he to assume that the scene of the incident and the position of the body had been altered. Although Ellen's parents tried, the lawyer failed to change the version of incident, as it would have been necessary to present more compelling evidence. Therefore, the case did not progress and remained unchanged until 2015. Andre, an assistant attorney, did not officially take on the case. However, he was intrigued by the unusual circumstances and decided to review the file to understand what drove Ellen to her actions. Ellen's fiancé, Samuel, found her, and he told the police that the door was locked from the inside, which forced him to kick it open. Andre noted in a photograph from the scene that the lock was a simple hotel-style latch. This type of latch can be locked from both the inside and the outside by turning a screw. An analyst mentioned that this kind of latch typically cannot be broken by a kick without dislodging the door from its frame. Yet, the only damage observed on the door was a missing screw. Additionally, the police considered the fact that Ellen had no defensive wounds. It was unclear in which order her injuries occurred, but the final one was undoubtedly to the heart, where the knife was found. If one of the neck wounds had damaged her bone marrow, she would not have had any opportunity to defend herself. One of Ellen's head wounds, which indicated she was attacked from behind, caught Andre's attention. He raised these concerns with the forensic expert, who said a neurologist had examined Ellen and found no injury. He then asked for an official report to confirm there was no spinal injury, only to be told that no such report existed. It had been lost, suggesting it was more of a rumor that no one had substantiated. At the time, there was no neurologist in the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau, so Dr. Adams was brought in. She allegedly examined Ellen's spine and found no damage. However, it later emerged that no record existed of Dr. Adams being asked to perform this examination. In a 2018 interview, Dr. Adams claims that she did not examine Ellen's spine. Following this, Andre contacted a private investigator for the Greenberg family and recommended hiring a private neurologist. He discovered that Ellen's spine sample was still held at the Forensic Bureau, which seemed unnecessary. The family took this advice and hired Dr. Ross. He concluded in a report that Ellen's spinal cord was damaged by 2 severe wounds on her neck, making it impossible for her to inflict further injuries on herself. At the same time, Andre realized that the data the police had was provided by Samuel, Ellen's fiancé, who was at the scene. This was the only account of what happened in the apartment. Samuel said he had not been with Ellen for 45 minutes, and when he returned, he couldn't open the door. Neighbors said they heard Samuel screaming and calling Ellen's name through the door. Samuel said he became worried and started calling Ellen on the phone, sending her 9 text messages. When he got no response, he went downstairs to ask the building security guard if had any tools to open the door, but the guard refused to help. Later, Samuel claimed he went downstairs several more times, trying to persuade the guard to help him break down the door. In his official statement to the police, he said the guard was with him when he kicked the door open and entered. However, the guard told both the police and Ellen's family that he never left his post and did not accompany Samuel into the apartment. Additionally, the guard noted that Samuel, who claimed to have been at the gym, was wearing boots instead of sneakers. On the other hand, Samuel called 911 at 6:33 p.m., which means that an hour had already passed since he returned to the apartment and attempted to contact Ellen. This is very strange when analyzed. Let's think, he goes to the gym for half an hour. Later, when he returned home, he called Ellen to open the door, but she did not answer him. He shouts her name, tries to call her on the phone and sends her 9 text messages. How long should it take to realize that something is wrong? 10 to 20, maybe 30 minutes, but not an hour. Another strange thing that Andre discovered is that Samuel, before calling 911, made 2 calls, one to his parents and another to his uncle, who is a lawyer. Moreover, they arrived at the scene before the emergency services, and it was Samuel's parents who informed Ellen's parents about what happened. One thing is clear, no one would react in the same way as Samuel. Anyone would ask for help as soon as possible to try to save the life of the person they love, right? Andre listened to Samuel's call to 911, and he was surprised to hear Samuel speak in a calm tone. Even as Samuel said things like my God, his fiancée, there is blood, his voice remained steady. When the emergency services worker asked him to describe the situation, he ignored the request and instead talked about his trip to the gym and his return home. When they instructed him to perform CPR, Samuel asked, "Does he really need to do this?" After spending 2 or 3 minutes supposedly performing CPR, he suddenly told they that he had just found a knife stuck in Ellen's chest. Remarkably, although he was beside her the whole time, but before that he had not seen it. This was no small tool, but a 10-inch long meat cleaver. It was clearly visible. After discovering it, he told they that Ellen must have fallen on the knife. Following this, Samuel was taken to the police station to give a statement. He did so only in the presence of his lawyer and provided a very brief statement. After that, he refused to speak to detectives again, despite their repeated attempts to question him. It seemed there was no way to get him to talk. These things made Ellen's family believe that she was murdered. A neurologist hired by Ellen's family discovered a bone marrow perforation and also found signs of strangulation and bruising. However, many researchers reviewed the footage at the scene and were surprised to see only a small amount of blood. Ellen had 20 injuries, which raised suspicions that the crime scene may have been tampered with. However, the investigation did not conduct any crucial tests. The police did not even examine the trash after arriving at the scene. They simply observed and assumed she had died naturally and without protecting the scene. Additionally, the day after this tragic incident, Samuel's uncle, cousin, and brother visited the apartment, supposedly to retrieve a suit. They took Samuel's laptop, Ellen's laptop, and her cell phone. The police only seized these items on January 29th, 3 days later. Upon examination, the laptops showed search queries about ending one's life. Yet, the official report filed in April 2011 did not mention these searches. Ellen's parents and friends slightly changed their views about Samuel after the incident. They never labeled he as a suspect or culprit, but they did have doubts. They realized they had noticed changes in Ellen's behavior weeks before the incident but didn't think much of it at the time. Her friends observed that she started consulting Samuel on every decision, which was unusual for her. Ellen, once a happy girl, had become worried and insecure. One day, she told her parents she wanted to quit her job and move back home. She assuring them it had nothing to do with Samuel and she was fine. Her parents told her she could come home whenever she needed and advised her to seek help for her anxiety. In 2019, Deputy Coroner and Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences Gregory MacDonald presented a report supporting the police's version of incident. He stated that Ellen had inflicted superficial wounds on herself, as people often start with shallow cuts before going deeper. However, the deep wounds and marks that looked like signs of an attack also made him suspicious. After the incident, Samuel continued to contact the Greenberg family for a year, but their relationship eventually faded. He later sent them an email announcing his wedding. Today, he is married, has 2 children and lives a normal life, completely unrelated to the Greenberg family. The Greenberg family and their attorney have filed a lawsuit against the medical examiner, who performed the autopsy, and the Philadelphia County Coroner's Office to change and explain why the case was closed. In May 2020, a Philadelphia court finally supported their claim. The family hopes to receive the case file, which they were previously denied access to. There is also a CCTV video from the building. It does not show anything unusual. It only confirms the time Samuel left and returned to the apartment. They also asked to see the 911 call recording. These procedures were delayed, and the trial was rescheduled for 2021. If they win, the case will be reclassified and investigated as a murder. However, due to the time that has passed and the investigation's shortcomings, many clues have been lost forever, such as the luminol test. The Pennsylvania Attorney General's office closed the case in July 2022. The case has been transferred to the Chester County District Attorney's Office, which has assigned new investigators and a prosecutor to take over. This change was supported by Ellen's parents. They have always maintained that their daughter did not end her life.